Chapter 1. Ah Qing, are you really pregnant with his child? Mu Lin looked at Xiao Qing in surprise. She had grown up with Xiao Qing, so no one knew Xiao Qing's character better than she did. She and Xiao Qing were both abandoned when they were young. Although they were taken in by an orphanage, the orphanage was not as good as most people thought. On the contrary, it was very dark. The old women who took care of the children often beat or scolded the children. It was common for children to not have enough to eat, not to mention the ostracism between the children. Xiao Qing hated the people who abandoned her, so she did not want to have a child easily. She was afraid that she could not bear the weight of a newborn. Moreover, how could people like her and Xiao Qing fall in love with the same man? So much so that they were willing to have a child for him?
Yes.
Xiao Qing stroked her protruding belly, her eyes filled with a gentleness that could melt an iceberg. She had never thought that having a child who was related to her by blood would be such a blissful thing. She had prayed countless times for this child to come into the world early. Then, she imagined that in the future, she, the child, and Lin Qifan's family of 3 would be so happy. Mu Lin stirred the coffee in her cup and considered her words carefully. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Ah Qing, you have to know that in our line of work, how can we quit just because we want to? I've done enough for them. If they're willing to let me quit the organization, everyone will be happy. If they don't, Xiao Lin, do you think I'm the kind of person who makes decisions without any preparation?" Xiao Qing said coldly. She had served in the military before. Because of her outstanding memory, sharp senses, and excellent physical fitness, she was transferred to the Special Forces. Later, she retired due to injury. Xiao Qing's education was not high, and she did not have any special skills. After she retired from the military, she could not change her job. Coincidentally, Mu Lin joined the organization because of her amazing hacking skills, so she pulled Xiao Qing into the organization. Money laundering, arms trafficking, Xiao Qing's contributions to the organization were not small. Her only worry was that the organization would not let go of her, an outstanding subordinate. "Qing, be careful." Mu Lin bit his lip. "I'll go back to the headquarters immediately and contact the team leader. If I can help you, I'll help you." "Thank you," Xiao Qing said sincerely. Mu Lin pouted and said unhappily, "What kind of relationship do we have? Do you still need to thank me? What's there to be polite about?" "But," she hesitated for a moment before handing a few photos to Xiao Qing. "Even though you're pregnant and shouldn't be too emotional, you should still take a look." Xiao Qing frowned slightly. She took the photo and glanced at it. She froze. The main character in the photo was none other than her lover, Lin Qifan. There were more than a dozen photos, and the female lead was the same person. She had short hair and a pretty face. Most importantly, she looked familiar. She had seen this woman's photo on Lin Qifan's phone before. At that time, Lin Qifan had said that she was his superior's daughter. They had met during a social gathering and chatted for a while. Xiao Qing did not think much of it. Instead, she felt bad that Lin Qifan had to attend social gatherings for the sake of his career. Lin Qifan was not a rich second-generation heir. The university that he graduated from was not particularly good. Naturally, he had to put in more effort to succeed. Xiao Qing did not expect that Lin Qifan would take a shortcut. Looking at the intimate couple in the photo, Xiao Qing felt her heart ache. This was his superior's daughter? Mu Lin said worriedly, "Qing, don't be too sad. Let's ask him clearly first." "Okay." Xiao Qing calmed down quickly and touched her belly. She had a child. She could not be too emotional. It was not good for the child. "I'll leave first. Take care." Mu Lin picked up her bag. She was also very sad. If Xiao Qing had found a man who loved her very much, even if Xiao Qing gave up everything and left the organization for this man, Mu Lin would still be very happy. Xiao Qing had found a good home. But now... Chapter 2. Drive safe. Xiao Qing forced herself to say this before she watched Mu Lin leave. She sat there for a long time, looking at the photos again and again like she was torturing herself. Her love with Lin Qifan was like a fairy tale. Lin Qifan saved her when she was injured, and Xiao Qing was touched by his gentleness. She fell in love and got married. It was only natural. But now, the past seemed to have become a joke. Xiao Qing sat there until she calmed down. Then, she slowly stood up and walked out while holding her stomach. No matter what, the baby was the most important thing. It was almost time for her to give birth. No matter what, she had to wait until after the baby was born. Xiao Qing hailed a taxi to go to the hospital for another checkup. Before the taxi reached her, an ear-piercing screech sounded from behind her. Xiao Qing wanted to dodge, but her body was heavy. How could she dodge the car that was speeding towards her? The moment she was hit, Xiao Qing tried her best to protect her stomach. Her baby, no. The moment she landed, Xiao Qing clearly saw the young woman in the driver's seat smiling innocently. Her face was still in the photo in her bag. Xiao Qing glared at the young woman, but all she could do was watch her drive away. The pain in her stomach was like waves, wave after wave. She opened her mouth, but her voice was as weak as a mosquito's wings. Save, my baby, save. The passers-by looked at her with pity, but no one stopped for her. Instead, they quickly walked away as if they were afraid of getting into trouble. Xiao Qing was filled with hatred. She hated Lin Qifan, she hated the young woman, and she even hated these heartless people. She didn't care if she died, but her baby had never seen the world. Xiao Qing's vision became more and more blurry. She could clearly feel the blood flowing down from her thigh. Suddenly, a drop of water fell into her eye socket. It turned red, and she heard a cry of surprise. Oh, the rain is red. I've never seen red rain before. Was the heavens crying blood for her? Xiao Qing slowly closed her eyes. If there was a next life, she would definitely kill that adulterous couple. The basement level of a hospital was usually the morgue. Most of the paranormal incidents in hospitals were related to the morgue. It was probably because the morgue was too eerie and had something to do with corpses. It's too tragic. One corpse, two lives. Have you caught the culprit? Who knows? Look, no one came to collect the corpse. The voice gradually faded away. In Xiao Qing's ears, it was as if the wind had blown it away. She tried hard to open her eyes, but there was only blood in front of her. Xiao Qing remembered that she was dead. That car accident, her child? That's right, her child. Xiao Qing stretched out her hand stiffly and brushed away the ice. She wanted to touch her belly, but her bulging belly moved on its own. There was a bulge here and there, as if something was moving around in her belly. Xiao Qing didn't have time to think about why she wasn't dead. Her heart was filled with joy. Was her child still alive? Xiao Qing lifted her clothes and saw that her round belly was greenish-gray. It was wriggling continuously. It must be her child. It must be her child. Xiao Qing wanted to cry, but no tears fell. She was a little flustered. How could she get her child out? Her child, in that dark and narrow space, must be very scared. Xiao Qing rubbed her belly as she thought. At this moment, she realized that her fingernails had become long and their color had turned greenish-black. One look and you could tell that they were very sharp. Xiao Qing looked at her fingernails expressionlessly. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand and slit her belly. Her thin belly was indeed slit open, but there was no blood. Instead, a white and chubby little hand reached out from the slit. My child. Xiao Qing was very surprised. She watched as the little hand opened her belly and a chubby baby climbed out with difficulty. The baby wasn't wrinkled like a newborn baby at all. Instead, it was white and its face was pink. Other than one eye that was as black as a black hole, there was no white. It was completely like an ordinary child. He tilted his head and his eyes reflected Xiao Qing's sorry state. He bit his little finger and shouted at Xiao Qing, "Mama! Baby, my baby!" Xiao Qing hugged the little bun. She didn't realize that the big slit on her belly was slowly healing. She anxiously kissed the little bun's face. The joy of regaining what she had lost and the light after the despair almost drove her crazy. The little bun also obediently wrapped his arms around his mama's neck. His little butt twisted in Xiao Qing's palm. Mama's kisses tickled him. After kissing the little bun and calming down, Xiao Qing realized that there wasn't even a scar on her belly, let alone a slit. Something was definitely wrong. Could it be that she was a ghost now? Or a zombie? It's cold in here. Baby, don't worry. Mama will take you out now. Xiao Qing suppressed the doubts in her heart. She pushed hard and pushed the place she was lying in. When she came out with the baby, She realized that she was lying in the freezer that contained the corpse. She was really dead. No matter what the reason was, she was still standing here, still breathing, and still holding her baby. She had to thank the heavens for all of this. The heavens must have pitied her and allowed her to return to this cold world, giving her a chance to take revenge. Mama, baby is hungry. The little bun pouted and looked pitifully at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing, who felt sorry for the baby, was immediately melted. She kissed the little bun's face again. Baby, be good. Once we get out, you'll have something to eat. She just didn't know if she could produce milk in her current condition. If she couldn't, it would be a lot more troublesome. When she left the morgue, Xiaoqing discovered that her strength had increased by a lot, and her body had also become much lighter. These changes had all come so suddenly. If only there was a mirror at this time, she could also see if there were any changes to her current appearance. When Xiaoqing reached the first floor, she realized that she wasn't the only one who had changed. The moment she closed her eyes, the world had completely changed. Heaven and earth were turned upside down. Chapter 3. As soon as the elevator door opened, a skinny, greenish-black claw reached in. Its long nails were still stained with flesh and blood, followed by half a head. Why was it half a head? Because a part of that thing's head had been cut off by something. From the cut, black brain matter could be seen wriggling. Xiaoqing was shocked. She subconsciously punched the head. Then, she saw the head fall to the ground like a ripe apple. Her strength was so great, Xiaoqing didn't have time to be surprised. She looked at the corridor. The floor was covered in dirty blood, minced meat, and broken limbs. There were also some mutilated corpses, as if they had been bitten by some wild beast. If these things surprised Xiaoqing, then the other things frightened her. In addition to the corpses on the floor, there were also moving things. Their faces were full of rotten flesh, and their limbs were stiff as they wandered in the corridor. Some of them were wearing hospital gowns, while others were wearing nurse uniforms. It was obvious that they were all doctors and patients of the hospital when they were alive. Was this the end of the world? Xiaoqing suddenly remembered the blood rain she saw before she died. It probably wasn't God crying for her, but God's punishment for this world. Xiaoqing held the child in her arms tightly. She smashed the fire hydrant with one hand and took out the fire extinguisher. She held it like a hammer, guarding against the group of monsters at all times. Baby, don't be afraid. After comforting Little Bun in a soft voice, Xiaoqing realized that the zombies weren't like in Resident Evil, where they would pounce and bite any living person they saw. Instead, they were wandering around as if she didn't exist, or as if she was one of their kind. Xiaoqing touched her chest. She couldn't feel her heart beating. She smiled bitterly. She wasn't a living person. Maybe she was now like these monsters. No longer caring about what happened, Xiaoqing carried the little bun and walked out. She had to see if this was only the hospital or the whole world. The little bun lay on Xiaoqing's shoulder. His eyes were rolling. He wasn't afraid at all. The mother and son soon arrived at the entrance of the hospital. As Xiaoqing expected, the outside world had been occupied by zombies. It seemed that it was the end of the world. Baby, are you afraid? Xiaoqing gently stroked the little bun's back. Only then did she find that her son was still naked. The little bun obediently kissed Xiaoqing and said in a childish voice, Mama, I'm not afraid. Xiaoqing's heart was sour. She took the little bun to a clothing store. She picked a lot of children's clothes for the little bun to wear. However, there were too many things. Xiaoqing couldn't carry them all. If there was a bag or something, it would be easier. Xiaoqing thought. The clothes in her hand suddenly disappeared. She was surprised and happy. Did she have a space like in some novels? Xiaoqing closed her eyes and tried to sense if there was a so-called space. Then she really saw a space, but it was only 1 cubic meter big. A pile of clothes took up half of the space. Although it wasn't as vast as in novels, where there were all kinds of plants and people could be brought in, it could at least store some daily necessities. Xiaoqing was satisfied. She put away some of her clothes, some food, and some milk powder before leaving with Little Bun. Mama, where are we going? The Little Bun blinked his big shining eyes and asked. Xiaoqing took a look at the mirror. Although the woman in the mirror was pale, she didn't turn into a zombie. As long as she wasn't touched intimately, she shouldn't be discovered. She was relieved. Let's go to the capital. Chapter 4. Jing City was the capital of Z country. Although the population was large, the important leaders and military were there. Even during the apocalypse, Jing City was believed to be the most orderly place. Xiaoqing still had a child to raise. It should be better to go there. They were now in S City. Although S City was not far from Jing City, it was still very troublesome to go to Jing City without a plane or train. Fortunately, Xiaoqing did not have to worry about zombie attacks. This made her journey much safer. However, after walking for a short while, Xiaoqing was dumbfounded. In the beginning, she would only occasionally hear a soft grumbling sound, but she didn't think much of it until she realized that the grumbling sound was coming from her arms. She was stunned and asked, "Is the baby hungry?" Little Bun's face was a little red. He whispered, "Not very hungry, Mama." Then his stomach growled. "I'm sorry, baby. I neglected." Xiaoqing quickly found a house and found hot water to make milk for Little Bun. However, Little Bun forced himself to take a sip and spat it out. He rolled in Xiaoqing's arms. "Mama, my stomach hurts." "It hurts, baby." Xiaoqing was so anxious that her eyes turned red. How could this be? Little Bun cried in pain. However, because of his constitution, he could not shed tears. He only felt better after he had spat out all the milk. Xiaoqing was very distressed. She blamed herself. Baby, it's Mama's fault, Mama. Don't cry." Little Bun considerately kissed Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing also knew that her baby was different. She could not raise him as an ordinary child. However, seeing that her baby was hungry, how could she not think of a way? Xiaoqing found meat for Little Bun. However, Little Bun still vomited after eating. Xiaoqing's heart was twitching. If she could, she was even willing to give her meat to her baby. What should we do? Xiaoqing, who had always been a tough woman, was so anxious that she was about to cry. Her baby, her sweetheart, it was all because of that adulterous couple. She and her baby were neither human nor ghost. Mom will think of a way. Xiaoqing put aside those grudges and picked up Little Bun. She needed to find some zombies to observe. Xiaoqing felt that Little Bun's body should be similar to that of zombies. But before she could catch a few zombies, she heard gunshots outside. Xiaoqing squinted her eyes and looked down from the window. A Hummer passed by downstairs. There were several people sitting in the car. One of them reached out and a ball of flame appeared, burning several zombies that were chasing the car. Perhaps she also needed a car. As Xiaoqing was thinking, she saw someone waving at her from the car. "Are you a survivor?" Xiaoqing thought for a moment and replied, "Yes, are you here to save us?" "Yes, we are here to save people." The car stopped downstairs. 5 people got off and quickly went upstairs. Xiaoqing opened the door for them. The first person who came in was a middle-aged man. He looked dignified, but his eyes were not serious. He glanced around, and when his eyes fell on Xiaoqing, he was surprised. "Are you alone?" "Yes." Xiaoqing's face was pale, as if she was really frightened. "What happened outside? How could this happen?" "Don't be afraid. We are all paranormals. We can protect you. There is a survivor base outside the city. You will be fine once you get there," the man said, and signaled the people behind him to close the door. A young man with dyed blonde hair laughed sinisterly. "Boss, don't pretend to be serious. Anyway, it's the end of the world. Hurry up and have fun. Our brothers are waiting. We haven't touched a woman for a long time." Chapter 5. Xiaoqing's face instantly turned pale and bloodless. She didn't want her child to be a man-eating monster. At that moment, she wanted to cry. She had once looked forward to the birth of her child, but the birth of the baby was completely different from what she had imagined. Without the company of her family, she dug out her child in the hospital morgue with her own hands. But even if her child was different from others, Xiaoqing still wanted her child to grow up happily and not become a monster. Just as Xiaoqing's thoughts were running wild, Little Bun was already staring at the head of the corpse on the ground with teary eyes. He still couldn't express what he wanted, and could only point and say, "It's fragrant." Xiaoqing didn't know what to do, but she was still a decisive person. She quickly calmed down. God pitied her and allowed her to crawl out of hell for revenge. Now, she only cared about her child. Why would she care if her child became a man-eating monster? Were they still normal people? Xiaoqing looked at her slender black fingernails. The light in her eyes became colder and colder. Her voice was low but gentle. "Baby, what do you want to eat?" Little Bun was a little anxious. He kept gesturing. "Inside, inside." Xiaoqing looked at where Little Bun was pointing. She reached out with her slender fingernails and inserted them into the soft part of the skull. When her fingernails went in, she touched something hard. Xiaoqing had a flash of inspiration and pulled it out. There was a red crystal lying between his bloody fingers. It was only the size of a fingernail, but it was very shiny and beautiful. Little Bun's eyes lit up. "Mama, eat. I want to eat." After confirming that her son didn't want to eat human flesh but this crystal, Xiaoqing let out a sigh of relief. Even if her son wanted to eat human flesh, she could harden her heart and hunt humans for him. But there would always be a knot in her heart. Now that she found out that her son's food wasn't what she had imagined, her heart relaxed a little. Worried that her son would have a stomachache if he ate the bloody crystal, Xiaoqing washed it repeatedly with water before handing it to Little Bun. After Little Bun held the crystal in his hand, Xiaoqing began to look for crystals in the skulls of the other corpses. She found that not everyone had crystals in their heads. The crystals also came in different colors. She guessed that only people with superpowers would have crystals in their heads. Those with strong superpowers would have bigger crystals, and those with weak superpowers would have smaller crystals. Crystals with different superpowers had different colors. For example, the red crystal just now. Its owner was the one with the fireball. Little Bun was full after eating 2 crystals. Xiaoqing was going to put the last crystal. Little Baozi urged Xiaoqing, "Mama, eat too." Xiaoqing was stunned. She could eat it too? Little Bun was actually holding the crystal in his hand to absorb it. Xiaoqing didn't want to touch Little Bun's food, but she had a feeling that if she could absorb the crystal, it would be good for her to improve her strength. Only when her strength improved could she hunt more superpowers for Little Bun. Xiaoqing held the cyan crystal. She closed her eyes to feel it. Soon, she found that there was a faint cyan light in the crystal. Soon, the cyan light entered her body through her palm. Xiaoqing didn't notice that the dark red in her eyes was fading away. She only felt that the irritation in her heart was lessening. Soon, the crystal turned into a pile of gray powder. The wind blew it away. Xiaoqing clenched her fists. She felt that her body had become stronger. Ignoring the corpses on the ground, Xiaoqing carried Little Bun downstairs. The off-road vehicle those people drove was still downstairs. It provided Xiaoqing and Little Bun with transportation. After all, it was tiring to leave the city and go to other places by walking. Xiaoqing got into the car and looked at the gas gauge. There was not much gas left in the car. There were a few empty barrels in the back seat. Those people were probably going to the gas station to get some gas on their way back. For ordinary people, going deep into a zombie-infested city was almost certain death, but for Xiaoqing, it was simply too easy. She took Little Bun directly to the gas station. After filling up the car with gas, she also filled up a few empty barrels before preparing to leave. But when she was about to get in the car, she heard fighting in the corner. Xiaoqing looked up. It was a group of zombies fighting. She had never seen zombies fighting. Could it be that zombies also preyed on other zombies? Feeling that something was wrong, Xiaoqing didn't get in the car. Instead, she stood on the side and observed. Xiaoqing found that the group of zombies fighting was actually one of the zombies constantly killing other zombies. There were a few zombies lying on the ground with their heads broken. In the end, the zombies were all killed by this zombie. Then, the zombie began to dig out the heads of the other zombies. Could it be that there were crystals in the heads of zombies? Xiaoqing's interest was quickly piqued. She tried to get closer, but then she saw the strange zombie quickly turn its head, its dark eyes looking at Xiaoqing with a vigilant gaze. Xiaoqing found that this zombie was different from other zombies. Its face was different from other zombies. There was no rotten flesh or damage, although it was dirty, but if she looked carefully, she found that except for its ugly face, it didn't have the most obvious features of a zombie. Moreover, it was much more sensitive than other zombies. It was probably smart. Otherwise, it wouldn't have found that there was something in the zombie's head and actively come out to kill other zombies. Seeing that Xiaoqing didn't get closer, it didn't relax. Instead, it quickly searched all the zombies' heads. After collecting a few gray crystals, it watched Xiaoqing slowly retreat. How could Xiaoqing let it go? Just now, when this zombie was fighting with the other zombies, she also saw it. She estimated the strength of the two sides and quickly took action, because she thought that the higher the level of the zombie, the bigger the crystal in the head of this zombie. The crystal in the head of this zombie was definitely enough for her son to eat a meal. How could she let go of such a good prey? So Xiaoqing quickly made a move. She quickly went forward when the zombie was about to turn around and run away. However, this zombie was more flexible than other zombies. After hearing the sound, it didn't even look at Xiaoqing and started to run. It probably wanted to find a place to eat and digest the crystal first. Xiaoqing didn't expect it to run away directly. She was stunned for a moment. She looked at the baby in the car behind her and gave up chasing. She went back to the car with some regret. Xiaoqing took the baby and walked out. After walking for about 10 minutes, Xiaoqing kept feeling that something was watching her in the dark. When she looked in the mirror, that strange zombie was actually still following behind the car. Chapter 6. Xiaoqing had an intuition that she wanted to use this zombie as food, and this zombie also wanted to use her as food. Squinting her eyes, Xiaoqing secretly calculated how to catch this smart zombie. She was after all a human, and if she lost to a zombie in terms of brain, that would be really embarrassing. Xiaoqing leisurely walked for more than 2 hours. Seeing that it was already afternoon, she had to find a place to rest. After all, she would also be tired. Even if her body wasn't that tired, her mind was already tired. Xiaoqing found a small shop. There weren't many zombies inside, so it was quickly cleaned up. After cleaning up, Xiaoqing carried Little Bun inside. At night, Xiaoqing, who was sleeping lightly, was acutely aware that there was a noise by the door. During the day, she used a wooden stick to block the door, so the noise lasted for a while before it stopped. After a while, a figure climbed in through the window. Xiaoqing deliberately left the window open. When the figure gradually came closer, the already awake Xiaoqing quickly got up and directly pushed him to the ground. Xiaoqing didn't know what would happen to her body after being bitten by a zombie, so she didn't dare to take the risk. She quickly grabbed the 2 arms of the zombie in front of her and snapped them. Then, the moment the zombie tried to raise its head to bite her, Xiaoqing stuffed a new sock into it. 2 minutes later, the zombie that was tied up like a fried dough twist was wriggling on the ground like a silkworm, but no matter what it did, it couldn't break free. Xiaoqing moved closer to take a look. The zombie's body looked like an 18 or 19-year-old boy. Its appearance was quite delicate, but unfortunately, it was no longer human. She carried Little Bun, who was still sleeping, to the corner and continued to sleep. She was going to wait until the next day to think about how to deal with this relatively strange zombie. Early the next morning, Xiaoqing woke up to see the zombie curled up in the corner. It was curled up into a small ball, looking very pitiful. Xiaoqing first absorbed a piece of gray crystal taken from the zombie's body. After confirming that it wouldn't have any adverse effects on the body, she gave Little Bun a few. After she found that zombies also had crystals in their bodies, she hunted some zombies. Xiaoqing found that most zombies didn't have crystals in their bodies. Only a few of them had crystals. In this way, she had to stay in the city for a few more days to collect some crystals and then leave with Little Bun. After all, hunting zombies was always easier than hunting people with superpowers. Thinking like this, she prepared to kill this zombie and then go out to find food for Little Bun. Once she got close to the zombie, it woke up, continuously making woo-woo-woo sounds, as if it was threatening Xiaoqing. To threaten Xiaoqing squatted down, one hand reaching out to the zombie's head. It was indeed smarter than other zombies. It knew that Xiaoqing wanted to kill it. Its originally ferocious appearance suddenly changed. It wriggled back and made weak please sounds. Although its eyes were already black and gray, it made people feel that there was a light shining inside. Xiaoqing's raised hand paused, and she hesitated. The reason why she didn't immediately kill this zombie was that this strange zombie gave her a feeling that it was the same kind of zombie. She was a different kind of human being, and he was a different kind of zombie. However, if she took a zombie with her, no matter where she went, it would be inconvenient. So Xiaoqing prepared to kill it. But looking at the zombie's struggling appearance, Xiaoqing couldn't help but think of the time when she was lying in a pool of blood and also wanted to live. Can you understand the human language? Xiaoqing softened her movements and touched the zombie's soft long hair. That zombie probably didn't understand Xiaoqing's words, but it could feel that Xiaoqing's killing intent was slowly dissipating. It hurriedly rubbed its head against Xiaoqing's palm, indicating that it was very obedient. Xiaoqing sighed and sat next to the zombie. Before leaving this city, follow me, and I'll give you a quarter of the crystal stones. Looking at the zombie's obedient appearance, Xiaoqing's gloomy mood was a little better. She was on guard as she untied the zombie, but the zombie didn't attack her. It just obediently squatted in the corner. Xiaoqing found that the zombie's hands that were broken by her last night had recovered. This was a very strange zombie. As a reward for its obedience, Xiaoqing gave it a crystal stone. The zombie looked at Xiaoqing with its big black eyes. After a long while, it quietly reached out its hand, took the crystal stone from Xiaoqing's hand, and quickly ate it. It seemed that it could directly digest these crystals. After eating the crystal stone given by Xiaoqing, the zombie became closer to Xiaoqing. Silly, I'll call you Air Dai from now on. Saying this, Xiaoqing laughed first. The zombie named Air Dai was keenly aware that this might be a very unpleasant name, but he didn't protest and didn't dare to protest. He looked at Xiaoqing very honestly, which made people feel that he was a little silly. Looking at Air Dai's dusty cheeks and dirty clothes, Xiaoqing felt that she needed to help Air Dai clean up. She found a big tank from the store, and after filling it with water, Xiaoqing took off Air Dai's clothes. Air Dai stood there obediently, letting Xiaoqing take off his clothes. Xiaoqing's eyes moved down, sweeping over Air Dai's blue and white body, and stopped at a certain place. Hey, it's not rotten. Air Dai, who didn't have any sense of shame, strangely had the impulse to retreat, but he was directly stuffed into the tank by Xiaoqing. Before she stuffed him in, Xiaoqing flicked a soft part of his body and chuckled. All the hair is gone. Looking at the confused Air Dai, Xiaoqing was a little embarrassed and immediately prepared to bathe Air Dai. Zombies didn't like water, so he kept struggling in the water, but he was still washed clean by Xiaoqing. After the bath, he changed into a clean set of clothes. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't notice that Air Dai was a zombie. Touching the hair on Air Dai's head, Xiaoqing was very satisfied. At the beginning, she did have a trace of sympathy, but now she felt that it was quite good to have a zombie as a companion. At least zombies wouldn't stab her in the back. In this respect, those human beings were not as good as zombies. Looking at the adult and the child sitting on the ground, looking at her with the same confused eyes, Xiaoqing's heart softened. Probably after becoming a mother, women would have this kind of maternal love. This slowly overflowing softness temporarily covered the haze in Xiaoqing's heart and made her clearly feel that besides revenge, she had other reasons to live. Chapter 7. Xiaoqing let out a sigh of relief after digging out the crystals. She and Air Dai cooperated well. Air Dai almost swept through the entire city with her. In the corner of Xiaoqing's space, there was a small pile of crystals. These were the fruits of their labor for the past 2 days. These crystals, excluding the ones given to Air Dai, were enough for Little Bun to eat for a month or two. Xiaoqing prepared to leave. Before leaving, she took Air Dai to the largest shopping mall in the city. She planned to clean up the place for Air Dai to live in the future. After all, Xiaoqing couldn't always bring a zombie with her. Even if Air Dai was much smarter than normal zombies, there was still a lot of things to do. There were a lot of people in the mall, and a lot of people had turned into zombies. Xiaoqing entered the first floor and saw zombies wandering around, twice as many as on the street. Once they entered the mall, the human and the zombie began to move quickly. Although they had only known each other for a week, Xiaoqing and Air Dai had developed a great tacit understanding. Air Dai quickly seduced a zombie that looked more agile than normal wandering zombies. It slowly moved towards the door. Xiaoqing quietly attacked and cooperated with Air Dai to kill the zombie. Every time they killed a few zombies, Air Dai would happily take out the crystals from the zombie's skull and give them to Xiaoqing as if they were treasures. Xiaoqing disliked Air Dai and washed the crystals off his hands that were covered in brain matter. Only after that would she put the crystals into her space. Xiaoqing was worried that it would be inconvenient to leave Little Bun in the car, so she made a basket and carried Little Bun on her back. Occasionally, she would give Little Bun a crystal as a snack. Just as they were about to clean up the first floor, there was a sudden roar of a car outside the mall. Xiaoqing and Air Dai tacitly hid. Then, 3 men and a woman walked in from the outside. The woman kept throwing fireballs, burning the zombies nearby to death. Why are there so few zombies? I thought there would be a lot of zombies in the mall. The woman sighed and said. The tall man behind her said, Look at the ground. There are zombie corpses everywhere. I'm afraid that someone has come in before us. Then, are there still supplies inside? One of the fat men asked anxiously. If there isn't, then wouldn't we have come here for nothing? Let's go up and take a look. Don't be careless. Be careful, the last man, who was relatively silent, said. The group of 4 walked up cautiously. Fatty said as he walked, It's best if there are supplies. We're almost out of food. If we can't find any more, we'll have to rob. Tsk. If we can get a fat sheep like last time, it'll be enough for us to eat for a week. The woman sneered. If you guys don't go whoring or gambling, how can we lose all our supplies so quickly? All right, stop arguing. The tall man frowned and said coldly, Pay attention to the surroundings. Fatty, open your perception. Opening perception consumes a lot of my spiritual power. Fatty muttered and opened his perception. Once he opened his perception, he was stunned. There's someone in front. As soon as the fatty's voice fell, the 4 of them quickly became alert and prepared to attack. Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, but she instantly understood. The fatty's ability was probably his perception, just like a scan. That was how he discovered her. Giving Air Dai a calm look, Xiaoqing stood up. Sorry, I didn't know who came in, so I didn't come out. She knew that now wasn't the time to pretend to be weak. After all, if she was a weak woman, she wouldn't appear in a mall full of zombies. As soon as the 4 people saw Xiaoqing, their eyes changed. Especially when they saw Little Bun sticking his head out from Xiaoqing's shoulder, they became more alert. A single woman with a child could survive in a city full of zombies until now, and still appear in a mall unscathed. This woman's strength was definitely not low. It could even be said that she was definitely stronger than all of them. After all, none of the 4 people dared to say that they could go deep into such a city alone. As soon as they saw that Xiaoqing was a woman, the woman in the group of 4 stood up. Hello, we're from S-City's survivor base. Did you kill the zombies here? This base should be the same as the one the men had mentioned before. Xiaoqing thought quickly, but she didn't show it on her face. She smiled and said, Hello, I don't know who killed these zombies. When I came in, they were already like this. The 4 people looked at each other. They probably didn't believe Xiaoqing's words. The woman smiled and continued, I'm a level 1 fire paranormal. These are my companions. They are level 1 perception paranormal, level 1 strength paranormal, and level 1 wind paranormal. Are paranormals categorized? Xiaoqing blinked and asked curiously. The woman hesitated and said, You haven't left the city since the apocalypse, right? Xiaoqing nodded. Then the woman began to explain to her. After the apocalypse, some people turned into zombies, some people evolved with paranormal abilities, and some people were still ordinary people. There were many kinds of paranormal abilities, but there were 2 kinds that were more common. One was the nature paranormal, which was metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, ice, and so on. The other was the physical paranormal, which included the 5 senses paranormal with better hearing and eyesight, the strength and speed paranormal with improved jumping ability, skin defense, and strength, as well as the spirit paranormal, which was the evolution of the brain. As for the other kinds of paranormal abilities, they were all classified as other kinds of paranormal abilities. Now, most of the paranormal had just awakened. Because the nature paranormal's level was low, their abilities were relatively weak and not very useful. As for the system paranormal, Their abilities were more practical, especially the strength paranormal, which was more popular. However, anyone with some foresight could see that the nature paranormal would be the main force in the future. As people slowly advanced, the strength paranormal would be gradually surpassed by the nature paranormal with great potential. Xiaoqing thought for a moment and reached out her hand. I should be a speed paranormal. As for my level, I don't know. I just awakened not long ago, so I should be at level 1. Nice to meet you. The woman and her teammates exchanged glances and then warmly shook hands with Xiaoqing. She smiled and said, "We are also very happy to meet you." Chapter 8. Both sides knew what was going on, and neither side trusted the other. The woman's group wanted to dig out the secret of how Xiaoqing could survive alone in the city, and Xiaoqing was interested in their strange energy crystal. So although they were walking up peacefully, they were actually very vigilant, especially Xiaoqing. She originally thought that if these people didn't make the first move, she would be willing to explore the building peacefully with them. After all, she didn't know how strong these 4 people were, and she didn't dare to say that she could take them down. However, things often went against people's wishes. When the group just reached the 2nd floor, the fat man suddenly turned back and said, "No, there's someone else." As his voice fell, the silent man with the wind element had already sent a wind blade in the direction of the fat man's line of sight. Dai, who was hiding in a dark corner, roared angrily and quickly dodged the wind blade, but because of this, his body was exposed. Green-white skin, dark red eyes, and a body that was stiffer than a normal human's, all of which indicated that he wasn't a human. Even if he was dressed decently, it couldn't change the fact that he was a zombie. The 4 people's faces changed in an instant. They had never seen a zombie that was so fast that it looked like a living person. The tall man's brain worked the fastest. When everyone's eyes were attracted by Dai, he screamed, "Watch out behind!" However, this reminder was a little too late, because when they turned back, they saw the fat man with his eyes wide open. He softly knelt on the ground and finally fell down with a bang. Blood mixed with brain matter flowed out of the bloody hole in the back of his head. Xiaoqing shook the blood on her fingernails and, very unsatisfied, put away a white crystal. The woman's legs immediately went soft. She's not a human either. Did humans have long black and gray nails that could be freely extended and as hard as a sharp blade? Looking carefully, Xiaoqing's face was frighteningly pale, and there was a faint red in the bottom of her eyes. Even Little Bun, who was peeking out from her shoulder, became scary, especially when Little Bun looked at them with his sinister eyes. This time, they had indeed discovered the secret of Xiaoqing's survival in the city. It turned out that this beautiful woman in front of them was not human at all. "I didn't want to kill you." Xiaoqing curled her lips and her eyes turned sharp. Dai. The restless Dai received the order and immediately rushed towards the remaining 3 people. The weakest, Fatty, was already dead. The remaining 3 were not weak at all. She had seen what she shouldn't have seen. Xiaoqing would never let them leave alive. The moment Dai made his move, she also made her move. After being resurrected, Xiaoqing's speed, strength, and defense had greatly increased. After absorbing so many crystals, her growth in all aspects was even more significant. Not to mention, she was good at using short weapons. Now that her fingernails were sharp and tough, her fighting strength had increased by a lot. It was the early days of the apocalypse, and these ability users were still exploring. They couldn't use their abilities skillfully, and their fighting strength was greatly reduced. After a short while, they were covered in wounds, but they couldn't hurt Dai and Xiaoqing at all. Go to hell. The woman was the first to collapse. She suddenly rushed towards Xiaoqing without dodging. She gathered a ball of fire in her palm, and the ball of fire was getting bigger and bigger. Her forehead began to sweat. Xiaoqing could see that she had used all her ability to gather the ball of fire. She didn't even use a bit of her ability to control the ball of fire. This kind of fireball would explode if she wasn't careful. It seemed that the woman was ready to die together with her. Just as Xiaoqing was about to retreat, the tall man took the opportunity to release a wind ring to bind her ankles, making it impossible for her to escape. Dai was also entangled by the silent man. Xiaoqing's eyes were red. She stared at the woman and quickly threw Little Bun away. As soon as the woman came close, she would crush her throat. Even if they died together, the woman would die first. However, Xiaoqing really didn't want to die. After all, she still needed to raise Little Bun. If she died, Little Bun was a child. His identity was so sensitive, and he had to eat zombie crystals and ability users' energy. How could he survive in the apocalypse? However, the scene in front of her didn't allow her to take any chances. The woman quickly approached, and Xiaoqing's eyes were getting redder. She stared at the woman and felt a little irritated. If she had a long-range attack, she wouldn't be at such a disadvantage. Even if she had the ability to strengthen her body, she might still be able to survive. However, there were no ifs in this world. She could only endure it or hope that the fireball didn't explode after the woman died. Although the latter was almost impossible, the moment the woman came in front of Xiaoqing, Xiaoqing had already reached out her hand and crushed her throat. However, the woman's body had already fallen into Xiaoqing's arms. With a loud bang, the fireball rose and swallowed the two figures. Air Dai roared crazily and threw the silent man to the wall. He rushed towards the fireball crazily. His usually calm face had a ferocious expression. Chapter 9. However, Air Dai didn't manage to jump into the fire because the green flames rose to the sky and blocked it. The fire gradually went out, revealing a large green cocoon inside. The cocoon looked like a cage made of willow branches. It kept moving rhythmically and was unharmed by the fire. When the fire was completely extinguished, the plants that made up the cocoon slowly shrank, revealing Xiaoqing. Her face was paler than before, but she didn't look any different. Air Dai was stunned, and so were the other two superpowered men. The first one to react was the tall and thin man with the wind superpower. He didn't hesitate to leave his partner and run away. Xiaoqing looked at him reflexively. Green vines suddenly appeared under the man's feet and quickly climbed up his thighs, binding him tightly. These vines had small sharp thorns. Once they pierced the skin, they would quickly release an anesthetic liquid. The man's pupils dilated in an instant, and his body went limp. He forced himself to stay strong and release his superpower. However, before the small wind blades could fall on the vines, the sharp nails had penetrated the back of his head. There was a part of the back of a person's head that wasn't covered by the skull. When the nails pierced through, it was the soft brain. By the time Xiaoqing pulled out her fingernails, there was already a blue spirit stone between her two fingernails. The last man was a strength superpower. His face was a little pale, probably because he knew that if the three of them couldn't take down Xiaoqing and Air Dai, he would definitely die alone. At this moment, Xiaoqing's eyes were red. She lowered her head slightly and looked at the silent man with cold eyes. His eyes quickly dimmed, because Air Dai had broken his spine from behind. Xiaoqing was very satisfied with the 4 energy crystals. Moreover, she had suddenly awakened a superpower, which was what made her excited. Now, even if she blended into the crowd, she could pretend to be a wood-type ability user. Her safety was greatly improved. After retrieving the crystal, Xiaoqing carried Little Baozi on her back again. Her heart ached as she checked Little Baozi's body. Fortunately, Little Baozi was not an ordinary child. Otherwise, Little Baozi would have been in pain when she threw him out. After dealing with the scene, Xiaoqing took Air Dai upstairs. Since he almost lost his life, Air Dai didn't want to be too far away from Xiaoqing. Even when they were cleaning, Air Dai would try to stay close to Xiaoqing. They spent the whole day cleaning up the mall, and very soon, the interior of the mall was cleaned up. After throwing all the corpses out and cleaning the place, Xiaoqing sat on the floor and gestured for Air Dai to sit down as well.
Come.
Air Dai sat beside Xiaoqing obediently. He stared at Xiaoqing with his clean and clear eyes, like a husky. Xiaoqing took out a lot of crystals from the space, and then took out a small red bag. There was no pattern on it. It was simply made of 2 pieces of cloth. Xiaoqing put the crystals into the bag, and then hung the bag around Air Dai's neck. Air Dai looked very happy. He kept touching the bag with his hands, but he was afraid that his long nails would scratch the bag. His careful look was somewhat cute. Air Dai, I have to go. In the future, you will live here alone. Well, you will be a zombie. Don't provoke too many zombies. They are so fierce. Can you beat them in a group fight? Live well. Maybe we can meet again in the future. Xiao Qing touched Air Dai's head and then laughed at herself. She said so much to a zombie. How could he understand? Air Dai suddenly opened his eyes wide and shouted at Xiao Qing. He also pulled the red bag and stuffed it into Xiao Qing's hand. His expression was very sad. Xiao Qing couldn't bear to see him like this. After living together for a few days, Xiao Qing could understand Air Dai's meaning. He was clearly saying that he didn't want any of the crystals, as long as Xiao Qing didn't leave. But how could Xiao Qing not leave? No matter what her body became, her spirit was always a human, living in a place without people for a long time. Even the most tenacious person would go crazy. Not to mention she wanted revenge. I'm leaving. Take care. Once again, she hung the red bag around Air Dai's neck. Xiao Qing walked down. She walked forward. Air Dai was like a child who did something wrong and wanted to follow behind her. When Xiao Qing walked, Air Dai followed. When Xiao Qing stopped, Air Dai also stopped. As long as Xiao Qing turned around, she could see Air Dai standing alone not far behind her. He looked like he wanted to follow but didn't dare to. She was a bit soft-hearted. She had to bite the bullet and get on the car. When she ran out of the city gate, Xiao Qing couldn't help but look back. She saw Air Dai standing at the gate. His thin figure was even a bit thin. His roar had an indescribable sadness, and it echoed in Xiao Qing's ears. Resisting the urge to look back, Xiao Qing stepped on the brakes and quickly drove forward. Air Dai was left standing there, touching the heavy red bag on his chest. His entire body became gloomy. His voice sounded like he was sobbing. After a long time, Air Dai quietly stepped out. He looked back at the city behind him, and then walked forward without looking back. Chapter 10. The person who led the way told Xiao Qing something like how she could get a better place to live after leveling up her ability, and so on before leaving. Xiao Qing began to look around the place she would be living in for the time being. The room was not big, so she soon finished looking around. Then, she put the little bun on the bed and let him play by himself. The little bun poured out a pile of crystals and began to count them. Xiao Qing sewed a small pouch for him and stuffed some crystals into it as snacks. Xiao Qing began to decorate the house simply when a handsome man came over. He was wearing a pair of glasses and looked quite elegant. Looking at Xiao Qing's puzzled eyes, he hurriedly introduced himself. I live next door to you. I heard that a new person moved in, so I came over to take a look. We'll be neighbors from now on. If you need any help, just let me know. Xiao Qing and he got to know each other. After a round of greetings, she watched him leave. During the whole time, the man named Li Jing was peeking at Xiao Qing's breasts and buttocks. It was obvious that he was not a decent man. However, through Li Jing, Xiao Qing also learned some things. For example, as a superpowered person, they couldn't be a freeloader. They had to join the search teams regularly, and half of the resources they found had to be handed over to the base. For example, if there was any trivial matter, they could hire ordinary people to do it. For a little bit of food, they could hire ordinary people for a day's work. Of course, some beautiful girls were always hired first. The reason was self-evident. Ordinary people had to work in exchange for food, but they usually only got a little food after working for a day, so they had to come out to earn extra money. After learning some details, Xiao Qing lived in the base. In order to not be conspicuous, she signed up for a search team, the kind that went out to search once a week. There were two kinds of search teams. One was composed of ordinary people. They searched around the base and got fewer resources, so it was more dangerous. The other type was a team of paranormals. Because they often went to places where no one had been before, they could get more resources. Xiao Qing calculated that she still needed a water tank, a bathtub, and a sofa. She planned to go to the self-organized market in the base to have a look. The market was located in an area where ordinary people lived. There were all kinds of strange things to buy. Xiao Qing carried Little Bun on her back. Along the way, she saw people selling gold jewelry and luxury goods. There were also people selling strange trinkets and even pornographic films. However, very few people went to buy them. After all, at the end of the world, those luxuries were completely useless. Take gold jewelry, for example. It was a bit of a burden when wearing it in battle. Other than being flashy, it had no other use. One biscuit could be exchanged for several. Soon, Xiaoqing found a place that sold old furniture. Although it was called old furniture, in fact, even the worst furniture was 90% new. It was placed there, and no one cared about it. Xiaoqing chose a big bathtub, a sofa, and a pack of compressed biscuits. The seller was so grateful that he wanted to help her carry it back. Xiaoqing looked at the seller's thin arms and legs and decisively gave up. Anyway, the labor market was just a little further ahead. She could totally hire a strong man to transport the things back. Anyway, she didn't lack food. There were a lot of people in the labor market. There were also coquettish women with heavy makeup, waiting to sell their bodies in exchange for food. Xiaoqing saw the man squatting in the corner at a glance. It was probably because his muscles were very beautiful. They weren't bulging exaggeratedly, but they were streamlined, and even the curve of his muscles looked very nice. The only regrettable thing was that his muscles were full of big and small scars, old and new, overlapping each other. His hair was disheveled, and he sat in the corner shirtless. He didn't come up to sell himself like the others, but Xiaoqing always felt that he was like a lazy leopard. Xiaoqing's eyes swept over him. His muscles quickly tensed, and he entered a state of alert. This made Xiaoqing a little curious. What did he do in the past? So Xiaoqing decisively hired him. Help me carry some things. I'll give you 2 compressed biscuits. The man raised his head slightly. His facial features were very outstanding. His eyebrows were handsome, his nose was high, and his eyes were very lively. Okay. The man's voice was a little low and hoarse. He got up from the ground, and his height was completely exposed in front of Xiaoqing. He was about 1.8 meters tall. The surrounding people shushed him and dispersed. The remaining man carried the sofa, the bathtub, and followed Xiaoqing back. There were more scars on his back than on his front. They were overlapping, and some of them were obviously new. Xiaoqing had no intention to explore it all. She led him back. Chapter 11. No wonder little Baozi vomited so badly after drinking the milk powder. Xiaoqing ate 2 mouthfuls and didn't want to torture her stomach anymore. Seeing this, Li Jing hurriedly asked, "Is it because my cooking is too disgusting?" "No, my stomach hasn't been feeling well recently." Xiaoqing couldn't help but answer perfunctorily. Li Jing narrowed his eyes and chuckled. "Even if your stomach isn't feeling well, you have to eat something. If you don't eat, how can your body stand it?" "No." Xiaoqing just wanted to go out and vomit all the food in her stomach. So she said, "I'm really sorry to disturb you today. It's not that your cooking isn't good, but I really can't eat anymore. Another day, I'll treat you to my cooking." Seeing that Xiaoqing was about to leave, Li Jing hurriedly said, "If you don't want to eat, at least eat some fruit. I have some fresh apples here. Wait, I'll get them for you." Before Xiaoqing could refuse, he went into the back room to get them. Xiaoqing had to sit down again. Her stomach was churning, and she really wanted to go out and vomit. Li Jing took out 2 big red apples and a string of green grapes. He handed an apple to Xiaoqing and said, "Give the grapes to the baby." Xiaoqing wanted to refuse, but her stomach was really uncomfortable, so she accepted. "I'm really not feeling well. I'll treat you to something another day." Li Jing's eyes flashed with joy. He thought that the medicine he gave Xiaoqing worked, so he tried to persuade Xiaoqing to stay. Xiaoqing was about to vomit all over his face. She couldn't keep her smile. She hurriedly said, "I'll go first." Then she went out of the door regardless of Li Jing's obstruction. As soon as she left, Xiaoqing felt that Li Jing was following her. She sped up without saying a word. Using the anti-tracking skill she had practiced for so many years, she easily got rid of Li Jing. After getting rid of Li Jing, Xiaoqing found a corner to vomit. She vomited as much as she ate. After vomiting, Xiaoqing began to worry about the little bun in the bed. She wiped her mouth, rinsed her mouth with mineral water, and prepared to leave. He had only taken 2 steps when he saw a familiar figure walk out of the tent. His back was still bare, revealing his strong and muscular waist. He obviously also noticed Xiaoqing, and his body stiffened. Xiaoqing then saw that there were many more wounds on his body. Most of them were bruises. Xiaoqing wanted to leave, but she stopped when her eyes met with the man's deep eyes. The man seemed to be hesitating. After a while, he came over and asked in a low voice, "Master, Do you need any more labor? Xiao Qing frowned slightly. Her gaze fell on the man's scarred chest. She sneered, asking a woman if she needs labor in the middle of the night? Aren't you afraid that I'll let my imagination run wild and really ask you to labor? The man was obviously at a loss. He was stunned for a moment, and his cheeks were covered by the moonlight. His lips squirmed, and he stuttered, I didn't mean that. I know. I'm just kidding. Xiao Qing spurned her own bad taste and patted the man's shoulder. Can you tell me what you need? Medicine. Anti-inflammatory. The man's eyes lit up and then quickly dimmed. Medicine was even scarcer after the apocalypse. Most of the medicine was controlled by the base and provided to the injured paranormals. The rest could be exchanged with points, but the points needed to be exchanged with materials, and the amount of points needed to exchange for medicine was very high. The man didn't have any abilities, so he could only rely on his physical strength. He also joined a search team made up of ordinary people, but the amount he got was only enough to eat, and he couldn't take out any extra materials to exchange for points. He lived frugally, and the points he collected were not even enough to exchange for the most common medicine. Therefore, after the apocalypse, ordinary people really couldn't afford to get sick. I have some. Xiao Qing had collected a lot of medicine, but she later found that she and Little Bun didn't have the physique to get sick, so the medicine was useless. Fortunately, she didn't have time to throw it away. Can you give me some? I can help you. As he spoke, the man's face turned red. He naturally knew that he was taking advantage of Xiao Qing. Yes, but I have a question to ask you. Xiao Qing nodded and asked, What did you do before? The man said, I used to be a soldier, but later I retired due to injury. Xiao Qing's impression of the man immediately rose a lot, probably because she was also a retired soldier, so she always had some inexplicable good feelings for soldiers. Moreover, the man retired due to injury, and his situation was the same as hers. How much do you need? Xiao Qing asked. I don't know. The man frowned and opened the tent curtain behind him and saw a woman lying on a tattered quilt. The woman was in her 50s or 60s, and there was a deep wound on her bare thigh, which seemed to be torn open. Because it wasn't treated in time, the wound was full of pus and blood, causing a strange smell in the air. The man was a little embarrassed and said, My mother's wound has been infected for a long time, and the smell is not good. Please don't mind. It's nothing. Xiao Qing didn't want to reveal her space, so she said, Come to my place tomorrow. I don't have any medicine with me. Okay. The man was very ashamed and said, But I have nothing to give you. Xiao Qing's eyes swept over the man's strong chest, and she touched his chest with some teasing and said with a smile, It's okay. You are mine in the future. The honest man shrank back, and his face was so red that it was about to drip blood. Obviously, he had never been teased like this, and his whole person seemed to be a lot more dull. Until Xiao Qing's voice floated into his ears, What's your name? Yin Hanqing, he said reflexively. My name is Xiao Qing. Remember to come to me tomorrow? Seeing that Yin Hanqing was still in a daze, Xiao Qing couldn't help but smile, and then she turned and left. Yin Hanqing waited until Xiao Qing was far away before he reacted, and his forehead was full of sweat. Just what did she say? Chapter 12. Xiao Qing went home, but she didn't know that Li Jing was stunned at the moment. He gave Xiao Qing a strong knockout drug, the kind that could knock out a cow, but Xiao Qing not only didn't faint in his house, but also walked faster than anyone else and got rid of him. What knockout drug? Bad review. Li Jing, who felt that he might have been taken advantage of by others, was very unhappy. He didn't know that Xiao Qing couldn't digest the food at all, let alone the knockout drug in the food. Xiao Qing, who didn't know anything, went home and slept soundly with her son in her arms. The next morning, Xiao Qing brushed Little Bun's teeth in a daze. When she opened the door, she saw Yin Hanqing squatting at the door, with dew on his crew-cut hair. He must have come early to wait for Xiao Qing, but he didn't want to disturb her. Come in. Xiao Qing gently kicked his leg. Yin Hanqing obediently entered the door and stood there, a little helpless. Xiao Qing pulled out a chair and said, Let's eat together. Anyway, the baby and I can't finish it. Yin Hanqing quickly waved his hand. Xiao Qing promised to give him the drug, which was already a big bargain for him. How could he have the nerve to eat Xiaoqing's food? Moreover, Xiaoqing was a single mother. Even if she had superpowers, food was not easy to get. He was a 7 feet tall man with hands and feet. How could he have the nerve to eat Xiaoqing's food? However, Xiaoqing had already pressed him directly on the table, set the plate, and put bread and eggs on it. Little Bun on the other side had moved his short legs and tried to climb on the bench, but his height was a problem. Xiaoqing picked up Little Bun and pushed the plate in front of Yin Hanqing. Eat. Yin Hanqing still wanted to decline, but Xiaoqing had already said, I'm going out to search for supplies, and I'll take you with me. If you don't eat, how will you have the strength? Yin Hanqing silently made a note in his mind, and then he picked up the bread with the fried egg and started to eat. After the apocalypse, food became more and more precious. The ordinary people in the base were given porridge, hard mixed grain pancakes, soft bread, and fried golden eggs. It was already a rare thing. Yin Hanqing was even a little reluctant to eat it. He wanted to bring it back to his mother. Xiaoqing saw through his thoughts and said, There's more in the pot. Bring some back for Annie later. Yin Hanqing's face turned red. After a while, he said in a muffled voice, I'll pay you back later. If he was asked to bring it back to eat, he would definitely not accept it. However, he still had an old and injured mother at home. Okay. Xiaoqing did not use a pretentious tone to say anything. She knew that not only would she not help Yin Hanqing, but she would also hurt his dignity. Probably because of the training in the army, Yin Hanqing did not say a word while eating. In the end, Yin Hanqing, who was full, and Xiaoqing, who was not eating, looked at Little Bun clumsily using a table knife to cut the egg. Little Bun and Xiaoqing were different. Xiaoqing only wanted to vomit after eating normal food, but Little Bun could still eat some high-calorie food after absorbing some crystals. Therefore, Xiaoqing often made something to nourish Little Bun. Perhaps subconsciously, she still hoped that Little Bun could be like a normal child. Here's medicine that can last for about 2 weeks. Take it back first. Xiaoqing took out the medicine bag that she had prepared beforehand and handed it to Yin Hanqing. I'm going out in 2 days. Are you free? I can ask a friend to take care of my mother. Yin Hanqing nodded. I'm fine. That's good. Xiaoqing stood up and packed the remaining fried egg in the pot. She also stuffed a few packs of ham sausages and bread into it and handed it to Yin Hanqing. Don't forget. It should be the day after tomorrow at the latest. Yin Hanqing nodded. He was eager to go back and give his mother the medicine. Xiaoqing did not ask him to stay. Go quickly. I'm going to see Annie too. Yin Hanqing knew that Xiaoqing was worried that someone would see the medicine in his arms and steal it. She specially escorted him. His heart felt warm. He could not help but think of Xiaoqing's words that night. She said that he was her. Other things aside, just the things that he owed her were enough to repay with his life. Thinking that there were other ways to repay her, the honest Yin Hanqing could feel his face burning without touching it. Xiaoqing carried the Little Bun on her back and walked with Yin Hanqing to where he lived. Yin Hanqing secretly glanced at Xiaoqing. He could not help but think that Xiaoqing was such a beautiful and capable girl. How could she fall for him? He must have heard wrongly. Even if she had a child, men who were willing to be with Xiaoqing would definitely go for her. How could it be his turn? The more Yin Hanqing thought about it, the more he felt that he might have heard wrongly. Yin Hanqing started his military service at the age of 18. He had not been in a relationship until he retired due to injury at the age of 27. After all, there were almost no girls in the military, especially in the unit he was in. Because of some special circumstances, other than the military doctor, everyone was male. Therefore, it was Yin Hanqing's first time coming into contact with a girl as soft as Xiaoqing. As he thought about it, his palms became wet with sweat. Chapter 13. The next day, Xiaoqing packed her things and contacted a team of paranormals. On the surface, Xiaoqing was a wood paranormal. Wood paranormals were more popular, even though she was only at level 1. Soon, Xiaoqing found a team that was willing to accept her. Many search teams were made up of paranormals and ordinary people. After all, paranormals were rare. Those who could gather a team of paranormals were usually the top search teams in the base. Such teams generally didn't accept people. Xiaoqing didn't find many people in the team. There were only 3 paranormals, a pair of brother and sister. The brother was a man of few words, but he was quite good-looking. He had deep facial features and delicate eyebrows. It was a pity that he had facial paralysis. The younger sister was quite lively. She was a little beauty with almond-shaped eyes and cherry lips. She wore a little halter top that revealed her navel and chattered very energetically. Thus, Xiaoqing quickly found out that the older brother's name was Gu Chuan and the younger sister's name was Gu Panpan. The other paranormal was called A2. He was round and had an earth paranormal ability. In addition to the 3 paranormals, there was also a couple of ordinary people. Including Xiaoqing and the others, there were 7 people. Xiaoqing arrived at the agreed meeting place. The other people had also arrived. When the woman saw Xiaoqing, her face changed. She muttered, "You're going out to search for supplies with a child. It's not like you're on vacation. Do you want to die?" The man hurriedly pulled his wife's sleeve and smiled pleasingly. "Don't mind her, madam. My wife is quite straightforward." Xiaoqing shook her head and said, "I don't know many people in the base. The baby is still young. I don't feel safe to entrust him to others, so I brought him with me. Don't worry, my baby also has a paranormal ability. Although it's only his 5 senses, it's still useful. He won't drag you down." When they heard that the little bun had a paranormal ability, the couple's face changed. They didn't say anything else. Gu Panpan was more enthusiastic. She waved her hand and said, "Hurry up and get in the car. Let's go now. It'll take an hour to get there." Xiaoqing got into the car with Little Bun and Yin Hanqing. Yin Hanqing was carrying a bag, which contained the water and food that Xiaoqing had brought, as well as some tools that he had brought. The 7 of them split into 2 cars. Xiaoqing, Yin Hanqing, and the siblings were in one car, while the young couple and the fat man were in the other. Along the way, Gu Panpan's mouth never stopped talking. She talked about everything from before the apocalypse to the apocalypse, from food and clothing to entertainment, from gossip to rumors. In the end, Xiaoqing was completely stupefied. She finally understood why Gu Chuan always had a poker face. If she had such a younger sister, she would probably have a paralyzed face now. Moreover, it was possible that the person with facial paralysis was more powerful than Gu Chuan. When they finally arrived at their destination, Xiaoqing got out of the car as if she was escaping. Gu Panpan was still not satisfied. After she got out of the passenger seat, she looked at Xiaoqing with a happy expression. "I'll talk to you again when I have time." Xiaoqing was speechless. "I refuse." The 7 of them, including Little Bun, entered the destination together. Because of various reasons, even though they knew that there were many good things in big cities, they didn't dare to enter big cities to search for supplies. They could only go to smaller towns. Most of the houses in the towns were single-story houses. The density of people was low, so there were fewer zombies than in big cities. For a small search team like them, although there was less meat in the towns, it was much safer. As soon as they got out of the car, Xiaoqing noticed that the man beside her quickly became alert. This alertness didn't only affect his mind, but also his body. His muscles were in a state of alertness. As long as there was danger, he would be able to react immediately. Should it be said that he was indeed from the military? Xiaoqing glanced at Yin Hanqing from the corner of her eyes. She took the lead and walked forward. Yin Hanqing quickly followed. He stood behind Xiaoqing on the left. This position could prevent people from sneaking up on Xiaoqing. Secondly, if something unexpected happened, he could quickly block the disaster for Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing had taken on many bodyguard missions. She had protected many important people. Naturally, she understood the meaning of Yin Hanqing's actions better than anyone else. Xiaoqing couldn't help but smile. Even her footsteps became lighter. The second she died, her heart was filled with hatred. She hated the woman who killed her and her baby. She hated Lin Qifan who betrayed her. Because of this, she even thought that there were no good men in the world. All men were bad. However, at this second, Yin Hanqing made Xiaoqing feel that no matter what Yin Hanqing's thoughts were, whether it was to repay a debt of gratitude or to get used to it, at least he was a good man. Previously, she helped Yin Hanqing because of her colleagues. Now, she felt that her decision was right. "Don't get separated when we enter the town," Gu Chuan said the second sentence after he met Xiaoqing. Before that, He only said 2 words, hello. Even his self-introduction was done by Gu Pan. Once we get separated, it will be difficult to rescue if we are surrounded by zombies. So, try not to stray too far from the team. Gu Pan added carefully. Then, they really stepped into the town. Normally, when a search team went out to search for supplies, they would also search for survivors. If they could protect themselves, they would bring the survivors back to the base. Survivors were the foundation of the base's strength. If a survivor wanted to live in the base for a long time, they would have to hand over half of their supplies. The base would give out 10% of this half to the people who found the survivor. Of course, people like Xiaoqing, who looked poor on the surface, might be too lazy to save people if they met someone who was in a bad mood. After they entered the town, they kept their vigilance and started searching. People in the countryside usually had some food in their homes. After the harvest every year, they would build a kind of pointed grain store to store food. Therefore, Xiaoqing and the others had to search from house to house and bring back all the food they found. Unfortunately, this kind of town was close to the base, so people had already been here. Most of the things on the surface had already been searched. The group searched for a long time. Except for zombies, they didn't find any grains of rice. However, they saw a lot of corpses. Many people in the family had one person turned into a zombie, and the whole family had been bitten to death and turned into zombies. There were also people whose whole family had turned into zombies, and only one person was alive. This kind of people was more miserable. They were all gnawed to bones. I remember that there is a granary in front of us. It is where the merchants in the village store their rice. Two pointed to the front and said, "Why don't we go and have a look?" Chapter 14. There were a lot of zombies around the granary, so there should still be some food left. After some discussion, they decided to go to the granary. Xiaoqing also successfully witnessed Gu Pan and Gu Chuan's superpowers. Gu Pan was a girl, but her superpower was actually strengthening. At the beginning of the battle, she turned into a King Kong Barbie, the kind that could tear apart zombies with her bare hands. On the other hand, Gu Chuan's ability was ice. His current ability wasn't very strong and was mainly used as a support. Every time, Gu Chuan would use his ability to freeze the zombies' feet, making them unable to move for a short period of time. Then, Gu Pan would break the zombies' necks like Hercules or shatter their skulls. Atu's special ability was mainly for defense. He brought the young couple along and used a machete to chop the zombies frozen by Gu Chuan and the zombies bound by Xiaoqing's special ability to death. Yan Hanqing silently followed Xiaoqing, holding a knife in his hand. Any zombie that tried to get close to Xiaoqing would be killed by him. The group quickly approached the granary. The granary looked very peaceful, with only a few zombies wandering outside. Let's finish it quickly. The longer we stay outside, the more zombies we will attract. Gu Pan, who was talkative, seemed to be quite reliable during the battle. The few of them nodded and continued to work together to kill the zombies. In fact, the combat power of these zombies was not high because they moved slowly. In addition to being ugly and particularly tenacious, they would not die unless their heads were attacked. If they did not gather in a group, even an ordinary person could kill a few zombies. Of course, this was on the surface. In addition to the fact that she was no longer a human, Xiaoqing also knew Air Dai's strange zombie. It moved quickly, had a certain level of intelligence, had a very fast learning ability, and even had emotions. Was Air Dai the only zombie like that? Moreover, zombies were likely to evolve, just like human superpowers could evolve. Zombies were likely to evolve in a certain direction, such as speed, body toughness, strength, intelligence, and so on. Therefore, Xiaoqing didn't relax at all. On the other hand, the young couple relaxed a lot when they saw the zombies being chopped up like vegetables. There must be a lot of supplies inside. When they arrived at the door, the young couple could not wait to push the door open. Atu immediately said anxiously, "Be careful. What if there are zombies?" The woman rolled her eyes and muttered, "How can there be zombies when the door is closed? Even if there are zombies, I can deal with one or two of them. They are just afraid that we will steal the supplies." Atu was a little helpless, but he still put the earth armor on the young couple. It was formed by his superpower. Because he was only a level 1 superpower, His superpower only formed a thin layer of earth armor around the couple's vital parts. But if there were any accidents, it could still protect them. Just as they were worried about accidents, a black shadow fell from the sky when the woman pushed the door open. The woman screamed in fear, and her face turned pale. She was about to run away, but the black shadow threw her to the ground. The man saw it and went to pull her up, but when he reached out his hand, he saw that the black shadow was actually a zombie. His face turned green, and he ran away, not caring that his wife was still on the ground. Fortunately, Xiaoqing reacted quickly. She reached out her hand, and green vines quickly tied up the zombie's hands and feet. Atu also used his superpower, and a section of the ground rose up to push the zombie away. The woman took the opportunity to stagger up and run to those people, but the zombie had already broken free from the bindings. The zombie was very fast. Not to mention ordinary zombies, even a level 1 superpower possessor might not be as fast as it. Xiaoqing frowned slightly. Those vines were part of her superpower. She could feel that when the vines tied up the zombie, the sharp thorns pierced into it. It meant that the zombie's defense was average, but its speed was outstanding. Gu Chuan, restrict its movement, Xiaoqing said quickly. Although Gu Chuan did not know what Xiaoqing was going to do, he quickly released his superpower. The zombie was too fast, and he could not freeze its feet like before. He could only try his best to turn the water in the air into ice. The temperature in the area dropped quickly, and the zombie's body was soon covered in ice. Its speed gradually slowed down. Atu kept making pits where the zombie landed. Although it was not very effective, it still slowed the zombie down a little. Xiaoqing saw the opportunity and released her vines to tie up the zombie. She wanted to fight with the zombie, but Gu Panpan and Yin Hanqing ran to the zombie's left and right. Xiaoqing's vines were the lowest level of mutated plants, and the anesthetic effect was not effective on the zombie. Soon, the zombie broke free from the vines. When it was about to run away, Gu Panpan, who looked like a King Kong Barbie, punched it in the face. Just like that, the zombie didn't die. It rolled on the ground and was about to run away. Yin Hanqing followed up and stabbed the zombie's head with his knife. The zombie's body bounced on the ground for a moment before it stopped moving. Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief and narrowed her eyes. She began to extract the crystal from the zombie's body. This kind of mutated zombie must contain more energy than ordinary zombies. This zombie is strange. Let me take a look first. Xiaoqing walked over and pretended to check the zombie's body. The young couple could not help but turn their heads away, unwilling to see the horrible zombie. Gu Panpan and Atu checked the couple. After all, they were ordinary people. If they were scratched or bitten, they would be infected. Xiaoqing squinted her eyes and found that Gu Chuan and Yin Hanqing were not paying attention to her. She quickly inserted her nails into the zombie's head and skillfully found the crystal. She did not look at its size and put it into the space. Chapter 15. Why are you sweating so much? Are you scared? Gu Panpan gave the woman a simple examination, but didn't find any wounds. The woman wiped her sweat with a pale face and said, "Of course I was scared. That zombie suddenly jumped over, and I almost became food in its stomach." "It's good that you're not hurt." Gu Panpan patted the woman's shoulder. The woman just smiled, but her face was getting paler. "Let's go. Why are you standing there?" Her husband came over and patted the woman. The woman was scared and quickly said, "Let's go." "Scared out of your wits?" The man smiled and pulled the woman to follow. This time, it was Atu who opened the way. He had the earth power and high defense, so he was the most suitable to open the way. This time, everyone walked in carefully. They didn't find any zombies, but there was a pile of bones on the ground. It looked like the person had been dead for a long time. So much food. Gu Panpan stared blankly at the granary. She didn't think that there would be so much food left in the granary. It was probably because of the mutated zombie that the granary hadn't been emptied. Several other people also went to the surrounding granaries to check. Sure enough, there wasn't even a grain of rice left. The pile of bones on the ground must have been left behind by the previous search team members. They must have ransacked the surrounding granaries, and then the people they sent here were killed by the mutated zombie. They harvested so much that they didn't care about this little bit of food. They were worried that there would be a lot of mutated zombies in the granary, so they left. Now it's our lucky day, Gupampan said excitedly. Even Atu chimed in. I think so too. We are so lucky. Even if we hand over half of the food, we can still get a lot. Go get the car. Otherwise, how are we going to transport the food? Xiao Qing was relatively calm. After all, they didn't need much food. I'll go get it, Gu Chuan volunteered. Yin Hanqing quickly followed. The others guarded the door and rested for a while in the granary. The young couple even took out something to cook jerky. The dried meat was boiled into a pot of soup. Along with the dried food, it could replenish one's strength. After Gu Chuan and Yin Hanqing drove the 2 cars over, the group of people began to eat. Actually, Xiao Qing didn't need to eat, but she couldn't appear too abnormal. So, she ate a piece of dry food and fed Little Buns some meat soup. In the name of convenience, she found a place to vomit. After solving the problem of food and clothing, the group of people moved the food into the car. Everyone was in high spirits. According to the distribution method agreed at the beginning, the 3 paranormals would each get 20%, and the young couple would each get 10%. The new members, Yin Hanqing and Xiao Qing, took 20% of the total because they were new members. Moreover, one of them was an ordinary person, and the other was only a level 1 female with elemental paranormal. To put it bluntly, Gu Chuan and the others didn't know Xiao Qing and Little Bun's combat power. So, they distributed the shares in this way. Gu Chuan and Gu Pampan looked at each other. Gu Pampan stood up and said, although Sister Qing is a new member, everyone has seen her performance along the way. I think that 20% is too little. My brother and I discussed it and decided to give them another 10%. Before Gu Pampan could finish speaking, the man in the couple couldn't help but raise his voice. Wait a minute, I don't mind if you give them a bit more, but where do you get the extra money from? Gu Pampan couldn't help but frown. The nominal leader of this team was Gu Chuan, but ignoring this point, Gu Chuan and Little Bun were ranked the highest in the team according to combat power and contribution. The man's words were simply not giving them any face. The 10% for Sister Qing and the others, and the 40% for me and my brother. We will take 30%, and Sister Qing will take 30%. Don't worry, we won't touch your 20%, Gu Pampan said expressionlessly. Since she said so, the young couple stopped arguing. Atu, on the other hand, was embarrassed. He quickly said, how about this? I will take 5%, you take 5%, and we'll take 10% for Xiao Qing and the others. No need. We are new members. 20% is already a lot. Xiao Qing didn't care about the food. What she cared about was the crystals. Okay, we'll split it when we get back, Gu Chuan said concisely. Let's go back first. The few of them didn't refuse anymore. They packed their things and went back. Ordinary search teams generally didn't spend the night outside, because zombies were the world at night. There were too many unpredictable dangers. Xiao Qing and the others had a good harvest this time, so they didn't need to continue searching. Therefore, the group of people simply searched the surroundings and set foot on the road back. The car full of food slowed down a little. From time to time, a few people had to get out of the car to clear the zombies on the road. Unexpectedly, they didn't reach the base before dark. There are houses in front of us. Let's clear one out and stay for the night. We'll leave tomorrow morning, Atu suggested. It was too dangerous to travel at night. Zombies are the most active at night. I also think we should stay for the night, Gu Pampan also said. No one had any objections. Atu first found a house with an intact door. Most of the houses in the countryside were wooden and iron doors. Atu saw a closed iron door. It seemed to be safe, so he went forward to open it. Before he could open the door opened by itself. A skinny person poked his head out from the crack. His eyes were green, probably because he was hungry. Who are you? Chapter 16. Atu was shocked. He took a step back and subconsciously released his superpower. When he saw that it was a person and not something else, he let out a sigh of relief. We are the search team from the S-City Survivor Base. We are passing by. Can we stay here for the night? The man looked at Atu up and down with a strange look, then grinned. Okay. But what is a survivor base? You looked around and said, "Can we go in first, and then I will explain to you?" "Come in." The man stepped back and let Xiaoqing and the others in. Xiaoqing frowned. She always felt that the man in front of her looked at people strangely, but she couldn't tell why. After entering, Xiaoqing and the others found that it was a sizable courtyard. There was a skinny woman holding a child in the yard, looking at the door with dull eyes. She only wore a loose coat, and most of her breasts were exposed to the air. From her neck to her exposed chest, there were bruises all over. When Xiaoqing and the others came to her side, the woman held the child in her arms in panic and murmured, "Don't eat my child, don't eat my child." Xiaoqing found that the child in her arms was not a child at all, but a dirty quilt with a small pillow wrapped in it. Xiaoqing's eyes quickly became cold, but she didn't say anything. The man who led the way hurriedly said, "She is a lunatic." The child was eaten by the man who turned her into a zombie. "We took her in because she was pitiful." "I think it's because she's pretty," the man in the couple muttered. Then, he was slapped by his wife. After entering the house, the man who led the way shouted, "Boss, people from the survivor base are here." As his voice fell, several cold eyes fell on Xiaoqing and the others. There were quite a few people in the room. Most of them were very skinny and wore ragged clothes. However, the boss that the man spoke of was dressed in clean and tidy clothes. He looked like a decent human being. Survivor base? The boss walked over. He looked decent, but he had a pair of triangular eyes. When he smiled, his eyes squinted. No matter how you looked at him, he looked sinister. After coming over, he smoked several cigarettes and handed one to Atu, one to Gu Chuan, one to the man in the couple, and one to Yin Hanqing. Gu Chuan and Yin Hanqing didn't take it, but Atu and the man took it. Atu smiled and took it. "Since the apocalypse, I don't know how long it has been since I last smoked." Atu was telling the truth. In the apocalypse, people couldn't even eat, let alone smoke. The boss took a lighter and lit it for Atu. Then he shook the cigarette box and smiled. "Beautiful ladies, do you want one too?" Gu Panpan and the woman quickly shook their heads and waved their hands to show that they didn't smoke. The boss didn't force them. He smiled and said, "I also heard that there is a well-built survivor base in front of us. I always wanted to take my brothers there, but there are too many of us. We don't know how many of our brothers will die on the way there, so we didn't dare to move. Now that I met you, you must be capable. Can you escort us to the base?" The man in the couple patted his chest and said, "No problem." Not to mention Gu Chuan, even Gu Panpan frowned at his rash answer. She complained that he spoke too quickly. "In that case, that's the best. Please come in and have a good rest. We will leave tomorrow." The boss asked the man who led them to the room to rest. When the man left, Gu Panpan said, "Why did you agree so quickly? Anyway, it's good for us to take the survivors back." The man said naturally, "It's not troublesome to take them back. It's troublesome." Gu Chuan said coldly. "What do you mean?" The man was stunned. Gu Chuan didn't want to talk to him. He went straight to the corner and sat down. Xiaoqing also found a place to sit with Yin Hanqing. The man was a little embarrassed, but he didn't say anything. Soon, it was evening. Someone knocked on the door and invited Xiaoqing and the others to come over for dinner. The few of them went out. Xiaoqing took the little bun out of the basket and held him in her arms. She then took the milk bottle out of her bag. It wasn't milk powder in the bottle. It was chicken soup that she had boiled before she came. She had removed the layer of oil on top. Little Bao didn't even need to heat it up. He wasn't an ordinary person, so he wasn't afraid of getting cold. Little Bao didn't want to let go of the bottle. Xiaoqing sat down at the table. There were two people sitting at the table. One was the boss, and the other was a young man who looked like a gangster. The others were sitting in the corner eating dry food. "There's meat." The young couple's eyes were filled with excitement. After all, after the apocalypse, they rarely had the chance to eat meat. There was not only meat on the table, but also vegetables. There were 4 dishes and a soup. Although this configuration was nothing in the past, in the post-apocalyptic world, it was already a very luxurious meal. The boss made an inviting gesture and said, "Everyone came from afar. You're all guests. Please sit down." Gu Chuan, his sister, and Xiaoqing looked at each other. They saw the temperature in each other's eyes gradually drop. Only the young couple and Atu were still very happy. Let's eat. Don't be shy. The boss smiled and put a piece of meat in Xiaoqing's bowl. Chapter 17. It smells good. I haven't eaten meat for a long time. The couple quickly put a few pieces of meat into their bowls. After all, meat was one of the rarest foods in the apocalypse. Xiaoqing didn't eat. She picked up a mushroom with her chopsticks and ate it. When the boss asked, she just smiled and said, "I'm on a diet." The guests and the host enjoyed the meal. After the meal, everyone went to rest. They were ready to leave this damned place. Xiaoqing strolled into the courtyard, followed by the silent Yin Hanqing. There was no one in the courtyard, only a small oil lamp. She didn't know where it came from, but the light from the oil lamp shone through the window, making it look gloomy. "Aren't you going to ask me why I stopped you from eating meat?" Xiaoqing lowered her voice. Yin Hanqing shook his head. "I can see." "That's good." Xiaoqing held Little Bun's hand and made him stumble forward step by step. She deliberately lowered her voice and said, "Ah Qing, I want to kill someone." Yin Hanqing was a bit stunned. No one had ever called him Ah Qing. It was so intimate that he couldn't help but blush. He even forgot to stop Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing helped Little Bun learn how to walk. Her steps were slow, and her voice was slow as well. "I'm not a good person, but I still have a little conscience. Smell the wind. The smell is too strong, and it lingers at the tip of my nose, reminding me constantly of what happened." Yin Hanqing's nose wasn't as sharp as Xiaoqing's, but the difference wasn't much. He fell silent and suddenly couldn't say anything to stop them. After all, some people were rotten to the core. Not to mention seeing them with his own eyes. He could even kill them with his own hands. "Something will definitely happen tonight," Xiaoqing said firmly. Her intuition told her that Yin Hanqing didn't say anything and just followed Xiaoqing. There weren't many empty rooms, so when it was time to sleep, Xiaoqing and Gu Panpan slept in the same room. If it wasn't for the fact that Gu Panpan was tired during the day, Xiaoqing would probably have listened to the gossip until midnight. Gu Panpan slept soundly, but Xiaoqing didn't. She hugged Little Bun and quietly curled up on the bed. When it was midnight, suddenly a scream came from the room next to hers. Xiaoqing's face changed immediately. She quickly got up from the bed and carried Little Bun. She didn't care about Gu Panpan, who was still sleepy. She went out for no other reason than the scream came from the man of the couple. Xiaoqing had a premonition that something would happen tonight, but she didn't expect it to be an internal affair. Xiaoqing arrived very early, probably because she didn't sleep. Yin Hanqing and Gu Chuan were just as early as her. The boss and his men arrived a little late. When they arrived, Gu Chuan kicked open the door. Everyone was shocked when they opened the door. The man's lower body was still on the bed, but his upper body was already drooping to the ground. His eyes were wide open, and there were a few deep bloodstains on his face. His throat was torn open, and it was obvious that he was no longer alive. The woman was lying on top of him, making a strange chewing sound. When she heard the door open, the woman turned her head. Her face and mouth were covered in blood, and her face was pale. Her skin was already rotting. "Do it." Gu Chuan's face changed. He pointed his finger, and the ice power was quickly displayed. The woman's feet were quickly frozen, and her feet were frozen together with the ground. The woman had just turned into a zombie, so her reaction was slower. She was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly became angry. She lifted her feet, and the ice under her feet cracked. Xiaoqing didn't say anything, but the vines just wrapped around her feet, and with a strong struggle broke. At this time, Yin Hanqing was already in front of the woman with a dagger. He stabbed the dagger into the woman's lower abdomen, and then he realized that the woman was already a zombie. It was useless to stab into her lower abdomen. He quickly pulled out the dagger, and the woman's hand with long shining nails slapped over. Yin Hanqing only had time to cross his hands in front of his chest, and then he was hit and sent flying. For some unknown reason, the woman's strength was much greater than that of ordinary zombies. She lifted her feet easily and broke the ice and vines. She stamped her feet, and then she came in the direction of Gu Chuan and Xiaoqing. The boss didn't care about hiding his strength. He pointed his finger, and a fireball flew out. However, the fireball hit the woman, and was extinguished before it could burn. Xiaoqing casually took a machete from the hands of a person around him and jumped up, and the machete fell on the woman's neck. The woman slightly tilted her body, and the machete cut into her collarbone and got stuck. Xiaoqing had to let go, and the woman's claws met force with force. Xiaoqing had eaten so many spiritual stones, so his strength was naturally greater than the woman's. The woman took a step back and howled angrily. Before she could shout a second time, Xiaoqing had already grabbed her arm and threw her over his shoulder. The woman was heavily thrown to the ground, and rotten flesh splattered everywhere. Before she got up, Xiaoqing had already punched the back of the woman's head. The back of the woman's head was dented, and then it was her neck, the back of her heart, and finally the woman's whole body was embedded in the ground for several inches. Gu Panpan, who came late, swallowed his saliva. In fact, Xiaoqing was a strengthening superpower, wasn't he? Chapter 18. When Xiaoqing got up and stretched her waist, the woman had sunk deep into the ground, and her whole body was twitching slightly. Check carefully next time. Xiaoqing got up and looked at the man who died tragically on the ground. Many people seem to have the same bad habit. If I died, why should they still be alive? If I was bitten, what if I didn't become a zombie? For example, this woman, she had such a fluke mentality. In the end, she died, and so did her man. Another example was the people who almost killed half of the base. Gu Panpan and Atu were a little embarrassed. After all, they were the ones who checked, especially Gu Panpan, and her face was red. I'm really sorry. I made a fool of myself. Xiaoqing smiled at the boss, and a dark light flashed in her eyes. The boss hurriedly said, "It's nothing. It's good that you are fine. Let's go. We have to get up early tomorrow." Yes. Xiaoqing smiled, but when she passed by the boss, she suddenly attacked. She was very fast, and the boss was not prepared. In an instant, he was nailed to the wall by Xiaoqing with a machete. The machete went through the right side of his chest and directly hung him on the wall. The two people who followed him were stunned for a moment and immediately prepared to attack. Yan Hanqing suddenly rushed to one of them, and the dagger in her hand mercilessly pierced into the man's eye socket. Gu Chuan and the other two people were stunned by Xiaoqing's sudden attack. Especially Atu. Gu Chuan's reaction was a little faster. He used his ice power, turned it into an ice blade, and pierced the third person's throat. There were only 3 people with superpowers. 2 were killed, and 1 was injured. Although the boss was nailed to the wall, he was not dead. He glared at Xiaoqing and said fiercely, "What are you doing? I kindly took you in and treated you with hospitality, but you, what do you think I am doing?" Xiaoqing picked up a dagger and pointed it at boss. When those people were eaten by you, they should have asked why, right? As soon as Xiaoqing said that, everyone present was shocked, whether it was Gu Chuan or the survivors who surrounded them. "You, what did you say?" The boss was a little flustered, but he still gritted his teeth and said, "Why are you slandering me? I really don't understand. What do we have for you to scheme against us?" "Then let me ask you, what did you guys eat to survive until today?" Xiaoqing asked coldly. The boss did not feel guilty at all. "Of course it's food. We have a granary to rely on, so why should we be afraid of not having enough food? They're all lies. There is a speed-type variant zombie there. You don't dare to go there. When I came here, I felt that something was wrong. In ancient times, there were wars and corpses everywhere. There were many corpses that were eaten by wild dogs. Their bodies were like wild boars, and their eyes were cold. When I came here, I felt that their eyes were like those of wild dogs that ate human flesh." Xiaoqing said faintly, "Of course, I can't be sure based on this alone. I just felt a little strange at that time. That night, the woman I met when I entered the door was gone, but there was a plate of meat on the table. The meat was fresh and tender, completely different from pork." Before Xiaoqing finished speaking, Atu had already held his stomach and vomited, because he ate the most meat. Suspicion became confirmation. After dinner, I walked around the yard, and the smell of blood was still there. "It's not the first time you guys ate people, right? You're quite good at dealing with the remains." Xiaoqing sneered and said, "So what? Seeing that he was exposed, the boss began to be unscrupulous. I saved them, and they deserved to die for me. What's more, they were just two-legged sheep, and they were eaten by me. Isn't it proper? Before he could finish his words, Yin Hanqing, who couldn't take it anymore, had already stabbed him from his cheek all the way to the back of his head. It didn't matter if he begged for mercy or shouted unscrupulously, he could only leave it for his next life. Xiaoqing frowned and glanced around. Is there anyone who wants to avenge them? The onlookers quickly shook their heads. Xiaoqing picked up Little Bun and walked back to her room, ignoring the corpses on the ground and walls. Sister Qing, why are you going back? Gu Panpan kicked the corpse on the ground with disgust. She had never thought that the people here would survive by eating human flesh. How many people had they eaten? Sleep, we'll leave tomorrow, Xiaoqing said without looking back. After all, it was night time, and it was not suitable to rush. Gu Panpan really did not want to stay in this place for a second longer. When she thought of the people around her who were used to eating human flesh, and then recalled that she had almost eaten human flesh at dinner, she could not help but feel disgusted. Let's go. Gu Chuan looked at Atu, who was vomiting, and left. Gu Panpan immediately followed. Xiaoqing and Yin Hanqing arrived at the door one after another. Xiaoqing paused and smiled. Why are you going to sleep in my room? Yin Hanqing immediately blushed and stammered. No, I've been following you. I forgot. Xiaoqing opened the door and looked at Yin Hanqing with a faint smile. Come in. I can't sleep anyway. Chapter 19. If you want to come in and sleep, just say so. Xiaoqing pursed her lips and deliberately said, The night is long, and I don't have the mood to sleep. It's good for us to have a heart-to-heart talk. I'm going back to sleep. Yin Hanqing stammered and ran back as if he was chased by a monster. Xiaoqing smiled and took the Little Bun back to her room. Before she could lie down, Gu Panpan came to Xiaoqing with a quilt. Probably because Xiaoqing was the only girl in the room, she felt safer with Xiaoqing. Gu Panpan tidied up the bed and crawled under the quilt. Probably because she was still a little scared, Gu Panpan kept looking for a topic to talk about. My brother, and I speculated that she might have been bitten by a zombie, or just scratched. Gu Panpan covered herself tightly and said in a low voice, This person is just full of luck. Maybe she thought that such a small wound wouldn't turn her into a zombie, so she hid it and finally killed her husband. Gu Panpan sighed. But I didn't expect that there would be so many survivors here, and I didn't expect that there would be people eating human flesh. Gu Panpan kept gossiping. Xiaoqing didn't feel sleepy at first, but now she was completely awake. She could only hope that Gu Panpan would quickly say that she was tired and go to sleep. In the middle of the night, probably because Gu Panpan said that she was tired, she actually fell asleep. Xiaoqing was really relieved. The next morning, Gu Panpan woke up and found that there was no one beside her. Xiaoqing had already taken the Little Bun to wash up. Gu Panpan quickly got up and packed her things, ready to leave this strange place. This time when they left, they didn't take anything, including people. After all, except for them, everyone here should have eaten human flesh. No one wanted to take someone who had eaten human flesh away. Although everyone was looking at them eagerly, they still gritted their teeth and left directly. Ignoring the expectant eyes behind them, the group embarked on the journey back. At noon, there was a haze and a small wind, reducing the visibility rapidly. Even the clouds in the sky were swallowed. No matter what, we have to go. It's too dangerous to stay here. Xiaoqing volunteered. I'll clear the way. The weather after the apocalypse had been very strange. Sometimes it was sunny, sometimes it suddenly rained, sometimes it was windy, and sometimes it was a thick fog. In short, it was very annoying. Xiaoqing walked forward while secretly counting the crystals in her inventory. She already had a lot of crystals in her hands, and there was also the crystal she just got from the woman's body. After absorbing these special crystals, Xiaoqing felt that she would definitely be promoted. However, it was safer to go back to the base to do it. After all, no one knew what would happen during the promotion. While walking, Xiaoqing seemed to see a familiar figure through the thick fog, but that figure only showed its face for a moment and then disappeared. That figure was too similar to Air Dai. Xiaoqing wanted to leave the car and grab that person to see if it was her air dye. However, now was not the time to think about it. Xiaoqing gave up the idea and continued walking. If it was really her air dye, they would meet sooner or later. While walking forward, Xiaoqing's car suddenly tilted violently to one side. Even if Xiaoqing turned the steering wheel, the car still hit a rock on the road. She got out of the car and saw that the tire was punctured. Moreover, it was directly hit by the car. There were piles of bones and remnants of weapons on the ground. She did not know who had punctured the tire. Xiaoqing frowned and asked, "Who knows how to fix this?" Yin Hanqing, who got out of the back seat, quickly said, "I know how to fix it." Then he carried the spare tire and walked over. Yin Hanqing began to fix the car after setting up the completely useless roadblock. The others also got out of the car. Xiaoqing frowned, guarding against any sneak attack. Xiaoqing was holding Little Bun. Suddenly, she heard a rustling sound approaching. She was immediately startled and guarded against the approaching zombies. But at this moment, the soil under Xiaoqing's feet suddenly loosened. Then, a flower suddenly appeared under her feet. The moment the pink and tender petals opened, Xiaoqing did not know what to say. Because the petals looked very pink and tender, they were very cute. The mouth of the petals was full of thorns. Xiaoqing even saw half of a zombie's arm hanging in the innermost part of the mouth. Man-eating flower? Xiaoqing was instantly stunned. She saw the huge flower suddenly open its mouth and bite towards her. Xiaoqing quickly retreated. The man-eating flower immediately pounced on her. The petals opened and closed, as if it wanted to immediately swallow Xiaoqing. It digested her like the arm in its mouth. Xiaoqing kept retreating, looking for a suitable weapon. The people behind her also quickly reacted to save Xiaoqing. All kinds of abilities quickly fell on the man-eating flower. However, other than blocking it for a while, they did not cause any damage. Xiaoqing picked up a rusty machete on the ground and carefully observed the man-eating flower. Generally speaking, plants should not move around. This man-eating flower had been using its long stem to chase after Xiaoqing to bite. If they left this area, the man-eating flower would definitely not chase after them. But once they left, they would have no choice but to take a longer route. At that time, the danger would increase, and it would be much later to go back. It was a headache. Chapter 20. Gu Panpan quickly leapt up and stood in front of Xiaoqing, grabbing the head of the man-eating flower with one hand. Her left hand grabbed the upper calyx of the man-eating flower, and her right hand grabbed the lower calyx, forcibly stopping the flower head from closing. From Xiaoqing's angle, she could see that Gu Panpan had used too much force, and that her muscles were as taut as a mouse. Gu Panpan was in such a hurry that she didn't see the barb in her left hand. The barb directly penetrated the back of her hand, and blood flowed down her palm. Tasting the scent of blood, the man-eating flower moved even more vigorously. It continued to struggle, causing Gu Panpan's forehead to be covered in sweat. Its thorns have an anesthetic effect. I can't hold on much longer. Quick! Atu and Guchuan quickly made their moves. One tried to use the soil to control the man-eating flower, while the other tried to use ice to slow it down, but both failed. The man-eating flower shook its head violently, and Gu Panpan, who was like a King Kong Barbie, was flung out. Luckily, Guchuan caught her. Without control, the man-eating flower opened its flower head and bit at Xiaoqing. It seemed like it was going to swallow Xiaoqing in one bite and slowly digest her. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth and stabbed the knife she picked up into the man-eating flower's mouth. Unfortunately, she only managed to hold on for a second before it was bitten off. The inner wall of the flower secreted a kind of sulfuric acid, which eroded everything that entered its mouth. Guchuan was thrown to the ground by Gu Panpan. Seeing this, he shouted anxiously, "Xiaoqing, you can find a way to subdue it." It was said that wood paranormals could subdue mutated plants for their own use, but most of them subdued relatively mild mutated plants. For example, those mutated medicinal plants were the favorite of wood paranormals because they could assist in healing. A wood paranormal had subdued a plant that emitted a stimulant-like fragrance. During a battle, it could improve his combat effectiveness and make him temporarily forget his pain. However, there were only a few who dared to subdue a mutated plant like the flower. Would paranormals could subdue one plant at each level. If they subdued more than that, it would be beyond their control. Xiaoqing happened to have not subdued any plants. That was why Gu Chuan asked her to give it a try. In the current situation, only Xiaoqing could give it a try. Their abilities had no effect on the flower, and Gu Panpan was anesthetized. If they didn't give it a try, they would have to go the long way. Xiaoqing took a deep breath and calmly dodged while studying the weakness of the piranha flower. She looked carefully and found that when the piranha flower attacked, it would subconsciously protect the slender flower stem. Its stem was tender green and looked more fragile than petals. It was estimated that it was like a human's neck, which was also a vital point. Xiaoqing rolled forward, avoiding the sudden bite of the flower. Suddenly, she stretched out her 10 fingertips. The fingertips were rapidly lengthening. The gray and black fingernails reflected a cold luster. They were quickly and accurately inserted into the flower stem. The green liquid immediately splashed out. The green liquid fell to the ground and immediately corroded the soil. Not to mention that the back of Xiaoqing's hand was corroded, leaving only dark red flesh. Xiaoqing's flesh was dark red, darker than that of ordinary people, especially the blood, which flowed very slowly and had a dark color. When it flowed out, it quickly solidified. She pinched the stem with all her might, completely ignoring the fact that her hands were corroded to a horrible state. The piranha flower's head was like a venomous snake that had its weak spot pinched. It struggled madly, but because of Xiaoqing's position, it couldn't bite her. Xiaoqing was also ruthless. Her 10 fingers sank into the flower's stem. The green liquid flowed more and more. The flower head struggled more and more fiercely. Finally, it fell to the ground, twitching, and the flower head was slightly biting. Seeing this, Xiaoqing bit her wrist. The dark red blood flowed out and flowed into the wound of the flower's stem. Visible to the naked eye, the tender green flower's stem was slowly eroded by the dark red. Xiaoqing poured blood and used the wood power to control the flower. About 10 minutes later, when her forehead was covered with cold sweat, the twitching flower moved, turned into a broken light spot, and quickly poured into Xiaoqing's body. Xiaoqing's eyes darkened and she fainted. Her last consciousness was Yin Hanqing holding her in panic. She didn't know how long she had slept. Xiaoqing only felt that the power in her body had been rioting. She longed for power and fresh flesh. Instinct told her that she was evolving now. Instinct also told her that she could draw power from fresh flesh. There seemed to be the freshest flesh around her, with a very fragrant smell, constantly seducing her. Xiaoqing slowly woke up and couldn't help but want to bite the throat of the person next to her. She looked down and saw Yin Hanqing lying on her bed. The strong young man shrank into a ball and nested on a low stool with great effort. His eyes were dark. It seemed that he hadn't slept for a long time. The little bun was sleeping on the other side of Xiaoqing, holding her thigh and constantly smacking his lips. Xiaoqing quickly woke up and quickly took out a few crystals from the space, including the crystals left by the woman and the mutant zombie. She needed energy to evolve, otherwise, she would definitely fail this time. After absorbing a few crystals, Xiaoqing's body was once again filled with a feeling of fullness. She could clearly feel a wave of energy flowing through her body, constantly growing stronger. When it reached a certain point, it was as if a layer of film had been broken. The surging power quickly broke out, and Xiaoqing could hear her joints cracking. She knew that she had made a breakthrough. Not only had her wood power improved, but her physical fitness had also improved. With her strength and speed, ordinary strength paranormals might not be her match. Clenching her fist, Xiaoqing took a breath. The stronger she was, the more capital she had to protect her child. Her movements woke up Yin Hanqing, who was guarding beside her. Yin Hanqing opened his eyes vigilantly. After finding that it was Xiaoqing, he breathed a sigh of relief and said in a hoarse voice, "You're finally awake. I slept for a long time?" Xiaoqing moved a little, but Yin Hanqing caught her hand and carefully tightened the bandage on her hand. "Your body temperature is very high. Gu Chuan said that your body is being transformed because of the promotion. You slept for more than 10 hours before your body temperature gradually dropped. Xiao Qing looked at the man's serious face and touched it. She said in a teasing tone, "You're so virtuous. You'd better marry early. How about considering me?" Chapter 21. Yin Hanqing couldn't help but turn his face, from his cheeks to his earlobes. He lowered his voice and said, "You slept for so long. Aren't you hungry?" "It's okay." For Yin Hanqing to change the topic, Xiao Qing smiled. She was just joking. Since she was resurrected, Xiao Qing didn't believe that men have true feelings. Probably because Xiao Qing was indifferent, Yin Hanqing pursed his lips after a long time. He said with a weak voice, "I don't deserve you." "What did you say?" Xiao Qing, who was immersed in her memories, raised her eyebrows. Yin Hanqing hurriedly said, "Nothing. I was talking to myself." Xiao Qing didn't say anything. She moved her legs and got off the bed. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt that she was different from before. That kind of body was full of power. The feeling of wanting to release it was really good. Even Xiao Qing felt that there was nothing that could stop her, but Xiao Qing also knew that there was always someone better. Too complacent was arrogant. She was still relatively self-aware. "Where are we now?" "Because you fainted. We didn't hurry. We just found a place to stop." Yin Hanqing looked at Xiao Qing's back. His eyes had a gentleness that he himself didn't know. Xiao Qing was the best woman he had ever met. She was not pretentious like those so-called socialites. She was real, beautiful, intelligent, and powerful. Even her every move was so free and easy that most people could only dream of. This kind of woman was like a cheetah in the grassland. Yin Hanqing didn't feel that he was worthy of her. It wasn't that he had low self-esteem. It was just like some flowers were too beautiful. He couldn't bear to reach out and pick them. "I dragged everyone down." Xiao Qing opened the door and found that they were in a house. Probably because of the zombies, the original owner of the house was gone. So Xiao Qing and the others directly used it as a place to rest. Xiao Qing opened the door and saw Tu and Gu Chuan siblings playing cards in the yard. When they saw Xiao Qing come out, Gu Panpan was the first to throw down the cards in her hand. "Sister Qing, you woke up." "Great. You were unconscious. I couldn't eat or sleep well." Tu grabbed Gu Panpan. Her face flushed. "How can you be so shameless? I was about to win. You actually put down the cards." "All right, stop fooling around." Gu Chuan patted the two of them and said to Xiao Qing, "How is it?" "My body feels pretty good. I've also successfully advanced to the next level. We can set off at any time." Xiao Qing clenched her fists and said, "We've been out for quite some time now. It's time to go back. Pack your things. We will leave in the afternoon." Gu Panpan was also very excited, although this trip lost two people, but the two were ordinary people, and both of them had bad intentions. Gu Panpan didn't feel that it was a pity. On the contrary, they had a lot of harvest. It could be said that they returned with a full load. So, after a week, they returned to the base. The most important thing was naturally to divide the loot. When they entered the city, what should be handed over was handed over. The rest all belonged to the five of them. Because there were two less people, and Xiao Qing's contribution was seen by everyone, the final distribution was 20%. That is to say, Xiao Qing and Yin Hanqing took 40%. This was indeed a surprise for the new members of the search team. Xiao Qing originally wanted to give 10% to Gu Chuan, his sister, and a Tu, but they didn't want it. Gu Panpan said, "Sister Qing, just take it. We have to team up in the future. You are already a level 2 ability user. Some big search teams will want to recruit you. You must remember our team." Xiao Qing nodded, finally accepting the supplies. She gave half of it to Yin Hanqing. "This is your share. Take it." Yin Hanqing would be lying if he said that he wasn't excited. Generally, the ordinary people in the search team were the family members of ability users, or people with skills, such as the young couple. The man knew how to repair cars, and the woman was a nurse, so the ability users were willing to take these people with them. Yin Hanqing didn't have any special skills, but he was able to get so many supplies with Gu Panpan. For Xiao Qing's sake, Yin Hanqing knew very well, and in his heart, he was even more grateful to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing took a look. There were a lot of things, and in the spirit of giving Buddha to the West, she immediately said, "You can't take it back alone. I'll help you." Yin Hanqing still wanted to refuse, but in the end, he realized that he really couldn't take it all by himself, and his face turned red. Before he could make a decision, Xiaoqing had already started the car. "Get in, idiot. Why are you standing there like a fool?" Yin Hanqing hurriedly climbed into the car and let Xiaoqing drive, sending him and the supplies to the tent where he and his mother lived. The place where ordinary people lived and the place where ability users lived were simply separated. Xiaoqing drove all the way, and she didn't encounter any resistance, only envious and jealous gazes. When he arrived outside the tent, Yin Hanqing's face changed. He quickly jumped out of the car, went around the tent, and carried his mother out of a pile of rubbish. The wound on the old woman's leg had rotted to the bone because it wasn't treated in time, and there were many flies on it. Yin Hanqing estimated that if he came back 2 days later, he would see the body covered with maggots, but even so, he still felt that his mother was dying. Yin Hanqing's eyes immediately turned red. He kicked open the curtain of the tent, and a voice immediately came from inside. "Who is it? Are you tired of living?" Chapter 22. A young man's head popped out of the tent. He had medium-length hair, with only a tuft of red hair in the middle. He had a cigarette in his mouth and looked very sloppy. As soon as he saw Yin Hanqing, the young man's expression changed slightly. Then, he calmed down and said, "Oh, I was wondering who it was. I didn't expect you to come back alive." Yin Hanqing tried hard to suppress his anger. The place where ordinary people lived depended on their strength. In order to let his mother live comfortably, he didn't know how many fights he had to fight to win a big tent for 2 people. The man in front of him was his defeated opponent. It was said that he was a relative of a psychic. He never expected that after he left for a few days, this man would dare to come and take over his place and throw his mother out. As Yin Hanqing expected, the friend he asked to take care of his mother was hiding in the tent and looking at him with a pale face. You're back?" It was obvious that the two of them thought that Yin Hanqing would die outside, so they came together to take over Yin Hanqing's place. After all, many search teams would also recruit some ordinary people as cannon fodder. The death rate of ordinary people as cannon fodder was very high, but they couldn't stand the high risk and also the high reward. So many ordinary people were willing to join. The two of them thought that Yin Hanqing was in such a situation. They didn't expect that Yin Hanqing would come back safely. "Get out." Yin Hanqing's voice was low and hoarse. He gritted his teeth, and an endless storm was brewing in his eyes. The sloppy young man swallowed his saliva and straightened his neck, saying, "This is my territory. Who are you asking to get out?" Before he finished speaking, Yin Hanqing grabbed his collar and threw him out. After Yin Hanqing threw the man out, the first thing he did was to look for medicine under the bed. He hid the medicine that Xiaoqing gave him under the bed, but his friend knew. Even if he knew that he couldn't survive, Yin Hanqing still had a glimmer of hope. But when he lifted the sheet, Yin Hanqing saw that the bed was empty. He looked at his friend expressionlessly and asked, "Where's my medicine?" Who knows?" The man took 2 steps back and looked at the young man for help. At that time, he was greedy and exchanged the medicine for points with the young man. He used the points to exchange for food and clothes. How could he give the medicine to Yin Hanqing? Yin Hanqing grabbed his collar, and the veins on his forehead bulged. He gritted his teeth and said, I trusted you. I entrusted my mother to you, but I didn't expect you to be an ungrateful bastard." After that, Yin Hanqing threw him out, and the young man who was about to get up fell to the ground again. Xiaoqing carried Little Bun and walked in. She took a look at Yin Hanqing's mother and then shook her head. It was probably because she had been sick for a long time. When she was still in the military, she was often injured. Even after she retired, she could be considered half a doctor. Now, anyone with eyes could see that Yin Hanqing's mother was at most a breath away. It was a miracle that she could hold on until Yin Hanqing came back. Yin Hanqing could see it too. He hugged his mother tightly and lowered his head. After a while, he said with a choked voice, "When I was young, my father passed away early. It was my mother who raised me. When I was admitted to the military school, she borrowed money from everywhere and sold her house and land to raise my living expenses and tuition. At that time, I swore that I would make my mother's life better, but I didn't do it. When the apocalypse happened, I couldn't protect her. Although she wasn't eaten by zombies, She almost died in the mouth of mutant animals. Later, she was transferred to the base. I didn't have the ability to treat her. In the end, I didn't let her live a good life. Yin Hanqing's voice became more and more hysterical until the old woman gently grasped his hand. Is Qing back? Mom, it's me. It's me. Yin Hanqing saw that the old woman had some consciousness, so he quickly grabbed her hand. He was afraid that he would frighten the old woman, so he lowered his voice and said, Mom, are you okay? That's good. Yin Hanqing's mother kept smiling. She held Yin Hanqing's hand tightly inside. I don't have any regrets in my life. The only regret is that I didn't get to see you get married and have children. Qing, if you find a daughter who is willing to be with you in the future, you have to treat her better. Once a woman decides to marry a man, she's entrusting her life to him. Mom, I know. Yin Hanqing buried his head in the old woman's arms, and his voice became more and more choked. The old woman touched his head and said regretfully, I can't let it go. I can't let it go. Auntie, don't worry. I will take care of him for you in the future. Xiaoqing couldn't help but say. The old woman glanced at Xiaoqing and smiled. There was no regret on her dirty old face. She gently pinched Xiaoqing's little finger, as if she wanted to make a promise with her. But before their fingers were hooked, the old woman had already died. Yin Hanqing's body trembled. He buried himself in the old woman's arms and didn't cry at all. But his back, which was always straight, trembled and showed some weakness. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She didn't know how to comfort him. She just silently looked at the two people who were preparing to escape outside the door. Life, it should be paid with life, right? Chapter 23. However, Xiaoqing didn't make a move because Yin Hanqing had already made a move. He gently placed his mother on the ground. His movements were so careful that it was as if his mother was still alive. Then, he strode out of the door expressionlessly. At this moment, the two men on the ground had already gotten up, especially Yin Hanqing's friend. He had already turned around and ran far away. Xiaoqing didn't plan to avenge Yin Hanqing, but she also didn't plan to let him escape. She tied the man's ankles with a rattan and dragged him back to where he stood. He wanted to run again, but Yin Hanqing had already grabbed him and punched him hard on the back. Xiaoqing felt pain in her internal organs. The man screamed, staggered, and fell to the ground. Then, he was beaten to death by Yin Hanqing. Yes, he was beaten to death. His cervical vertebrae and neck were broken into at least 6 or 7 pieces. His whole body was limp on the ground. He was still hanging on to his last breath. Once his last breath was gone, he would be a dead man. Yin Hanqing was very restrained. He just let the man be on the verge of death and then threw him aside. He also wanted the man to experience the good feeling of being unable to move after being seriously injured. He could only wait for death on the side. Then, he turned to look at the young man. He was frightened, especially when he saw that Yin Hanqing looked calm, but in fact, his eyes were already red. Don't mess around. My cousin is a paranormal. Don't think that you can be unscrupulous just because you found a little girl to back you up. The young man said sternly. That's what I should say to you. Yin Hanqing clenched his teeth and threw himself at the youth. The youth was much stronger than the person on the ground who had turned into a pile of minced meat. At the very least, he could resist Yin Hanqing for a while. Gradually, the two men's arms, faces, and all exposed parts of their bodies were covered with wounds. Especially the young man. His face was bruised and swollen. Even if his mother came to see him, she probably wouldn't be able to recognize him. His physical strength was not as good as Yin Hanqing's, who was born in the military. He screamed because Yin Hanqing found a loophole and broke one of his legs. The protruding bone cut through his pants. Blood quickly thickened and dripped down. Yin Hanqing took the opportunity to grab his hair, which was the strange colored hair, and then kept knocking his head on the ground. The ground was paved with bluestone slabs. The first time he knocked on it, the young man's head was already splattered with blood. Yin Hanqing did not stop. He grabbed the young man's hair and knocked on it 4 or 5 more times. Each time, the young man's head was covered with blood. When the young man was lifted up for the last time, he was unconscious. He kept muttering, "My cousin is a super-powered man. My cousin is a super-powered man." Xiaoqing glanced at him. His legs were dangling in a crooked position. It was obvious that Yin Hanqing had broken them all. His face was covered in blood, and his front teeth had all fallen out from kissing the ground again and again. He looked a little pitiful, but Yin Hanqing obviously wasn't going to let him go. He lifted the young man's neck and quickly broke his cervical vertebra. With a crack, the young man was dead. Yin Hanqing threw the young man's body aside, then knelt on the ground weakly. He covered his face with one hand and didn't make any sound. Xiaoqing could sympathize with him. She patted him on the shoulder and released the man-eating flower that she had subdued before. The man-eating flower's huge flower head kept swaying. Under Xiaoqing's command, it swallowed the young man's body, and then the man who was still breathing. There was a way to destroy the body. Obviously, the man-eating flower was a good choice to destroy the body. The man-eating flower's huge flower head just wriggled a little and ate the two people. It closed the flower head and began to digest. After a while, it would spit out the bones that it couldn't digest. After doing all this, Xiaoqing stood quietly beside Yin Hanqing, waiting for him to recover. Although Xiaoqing didn't have a family, she could understand the feeling of suddenly losing a mother. Especially Yin Hanqing and his mother had depended on each other for many years. That kind of relationship was probably deeper than a normal mother and son. After a long time, Yin Hanqing raised his listless face, turned to Xiaoqing and said, "Am I very useless? I can't protect anything." In the end, even my mother was in a miserable situation. She didn't enjoy a day of happiness in her life. Yin Hanqing sneered and said, "I'm a waste. I can't do anything. I can only passively accept everything." If it was another person, they might be considerate and comfort him, saying something like, "You're not a waste. You're actually very good." But Xiaoqing didn't. She looked condescendingly at the decadent Yin Hanqing and said in a low voice, "The end of the world is like this. When you're weak, you can only passively accept the fate of being prostituted. So why are you here feeling sorry for yourself instead of working hard to become a strong person? You may feel that you can't protect anything now, but you're much better than many people who can't even protect themselves." Xiaoqing's voice was cold, but with a concern that couldn't be ignored. "Now, get up, pull yourself together. Sooner or later, you'll be able to push down this damn fate and turn it around." Chapter 24. After a long time, Yin Hanqing suddenly smiled. He wiped his face, which was already splashed with a lot of blood. After he wiped it, the blood was all gone. "Thank you." Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She just lifted her chin, indicating that Yin Hanqing's mother was still in the tent. Yin Hanqing carried his mother out. Suddenly, he knelt down and kowtowed to Xiaoqing 3 times. Xiaoqing was stunned. "What are you doing? My mother has never enjoyed any happiness in her life. She only has one wish, which is to be buried with my father." Yin Hanqing blushed as he spoke. "I know it's very difficult to travel from here to H City at this time of the year." I, you want me to accompany you to send your mother there?" Xiaoqing looked at Yin Hanqing's difficult expression and continued. Yin Hanqing nodded and said embarrassedly, "I know it's difficult for you to do this, but please." Xiaoqing hesitated for a moment. Yin Hanqing also saw Xiaoqing's hesitation. He gritted his teeth and said, "Miss Xiao, you've already helped me a lot. By right, I shouldn't make such an unreasonable request. But among the capable people I know, you're the only one. Miss Xiao, whether you agree or not, my life is yours in the future." Xiaoqing looked at Yin Hanqing's determined face. After a long while, she said, "Okay, I'll send you there." It was not that she suddenly became kind, but in this post-apocalyptic world, she also wanted to have a few companions. Although Yin Hanqing didn't have any superpower, he was upright and determined. He was also a soldier, so he was more suitable for companions. Moreover, Yin Hanqing was now alone. Even if Yin Hanqing discovered her secret, it would be more convenient to kill him. This kind of thing shouldn't be delayed. "Let's meet at my house in the afternoon and set off." Xiaoqing turned around and was ready to leave. Then, she heard Yin Hanqing thank her again. From the beginning, she did have a good impression of Yin Hanqing. But that good impression came from Yin Hanqing's standard military temperament and silent and upright character. Now, Xiao Qing's good impression of Yin Hanqing increased because of his affection. Therefore, she chose to trust Yin Hanqing. After Xiao Qing returned to her residence, she arranged the food and let Little Bun absorb some crystals. Then, she contacted Gu Panpan and his sister. Although Gu Panpan was a chatterbox, Xiao Qing subconsciously felt that the two people's character was not bad. Especially Gu Chuan, he seemed to be more reliable. This time, she and Yin Hanqing were going to H City. The journey was indeed long. If she was alone, then protecting herself was a simple matter. If she also had to protect Yin Hanqing, it would be more troublesome if they encountered some special circumstances. Therefore, Xiao Qing prepared to contact Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan. After a simple explanation, Xiao Qing said that this trip was not small. She would take out some resources as compensation. Even if Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan chose not to go, Xiao Qing would feel that it was normal. Unexpectedly, Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan just exchanged glances and decisively agreed. Sister Qing, are we leaving this afternoon? I'm afraid that the body will rot after a long time. It's better to leave early and let Yin Hanqing's mother be buried early. Xiao Qing said, my brother and I have no problem at all. We have nothing to do, so we are bored to death. Gu Panpan said with a smile. However, Xiao Qing remembered this favor from Gu Panpan and her sister. After all, they had only known each other for a short period of time. They had only gone on a mission together. For Gu Panpan and her sister to give her so much face and risk so much to accompany her on a long journey was already very loyal. Then let's talk about the reward. Xiao Qing estimated for a moment and then said, the place we're going to is quite far this time, and I don't have much food on hand. I'll give you 20 caddies of fresh vegetables, 50 caddies of grain, and 10 boxes of anti-inflammatory medicine. Gu Panpan originally wanted to refuse. After all, she really liked Xiao Qing, and Xiao Qing was also very capable. It was good for them to have a good relationship with Xiao Qing. However, when she heard that Xiao Qing was going to give them anti-inflammatory medicine, Gu Panpan swallowed her words. Paranormals couldn't be infected by zombies, but they could still be injured. If the wound was infected and serious, they could die. Therefore, medicine was not only a necessity in the post-apocalyptic world, but also a very precious existence because the production line was broken. Sister Qing, I won't say anything pretentious. If you need anything in the future, just call us. Gu Panpan patted her chest and said. Xiao Qing invited them to have a meal at home. It was cooked by Xiao Qing herself. Although she had stopped eating normal food, her cooking skills were still very good in the past. With the addition of the fresh vegetables she had obtained from the base, the meal looked, smelled, and tasted great. Gu Panpan praised her for being virtuous. In the afternoon, the three of them packed up their things and went to find Yin Hanqing. When everyone was together, they were ready to leave. Because they were going on a long trip this time. Unlike the last time when they were near a survivor base, Gu Panpan and her sister brought a lot of things. They drove an off-road car, picked up Xiao Qing, and headed towards Yin Hanqing's place. However, when they arrived at Yin Hanqing's place, Xiao Qing saw an acquaintance. It was none other than Li Jing, who had drugged her last time. Li Jing was still wearing a pair of glasses. He looked very gentle, but what he did was not gentle at all. There was a little blood at the corner of his mouth, and he seemed to be angry. He threw a fireball at Yin Hanqing. Something must have happened to make him come to Yin Hanqing. However, he underestimated Yin Hanqing's fighting ability, so he was angry after being injured. Xiao Qing pushed open the car door and quickly jumped out. The green rattan had already wrapped around Yin Hanqing, isolating him from the fireball. It was obvious that Li Jing was prepared to take Yin Hanqing's life. Xiao Qing's eyes narrowed slightly. Her eyes were gloomy. To put it bluntly, she was a protective person. Yin Hanqing was already a companion she had chosen, but Li Jing was trying to kill him. It would be strange if she was not angry. What are you doing? It's you, Miss Xiao. As soon as he saw Xiao Qing, Li Jing's eyes changed. He said with a hint of eagerness, Miss Xiao, you shouldn't have intervened. He killed my cousin. It's natural for me to avenge him, isn't it? I'm sorry. Your cousin was killed by me, and I asked him to do it. Xiao Qing protected Yin Hanqing behind her without leaving a trace. She said lightly, "How dare you attack an ordinary person? If you don't agree, let's have a try." Chapter 25. Li Jing's face changed. To be honest, he didn't care about his cousin's death, but it was related to his reputation. The whole survivor base knew that his cousin was killed by an ordinary person. If he didn't do anything about it, wouldn't everyone step on his face in the future? However, Li Jing didn't want to fight with Xiao Qing because of a useless cousin. After all, he wanted to pursue Xiao Qing. Therefore, when Xiao Qing said that, Li Jing's face darkened. He deliberately ignored Xiao Qing's words and said to Yin Hanqing, "Hiding behind a woman, are you still a man? Attacking an ordinary person, are you still a man?" Gu Panpan stepped forward and rolled her eyes at Li Jing. "If you have the guts, then go and fight a high-level paranormal. Why are you acting like a bastard here?" Li Jing was a gloomy person, so he didn't quarrel with Gu Panpan. He just said with a gloomy face, "I don't care who he is. I only know that he killed my cousin, so he is my enemy. It doesn't matter if my enemy is an ordinary person or a strong paranormal, I will take action. For me, I don't care about their strength or identity, but if they are my enemy, put yourself in my shoes. If an ordinary person killed your brother, would you not take action?" Li Jing was not stupid. He also knew Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan. Gu Chuan was a level 1 paranormal, but it was said that he was on the verge of breaking through. Gu Panpan was also a level 1 paranormal. He couldn't offend them directly, but he could still make some sarcastic remarks. Nonsense. How could an ordinary person kill her cousin? Gu Panpan still wanted to say something, but Xiao Qing stopped her. "It seems that I shouldn't stop you." Before Li Jing could rejoice, she heard Xiao Qing continue, "But don't even think about making a move against Yin Hanqing today. I won't interfere unless you beat me." When Li Jing heard this, she said, "All right, let's spar then." After all, Xiao Qing had just arrived at the base, and it was said that she was only a level 1 wood-type paranormal. The attack power of a wood-type paranormal was weaker than that of a fire-type paranormal, not to mention that he was already at the peak of level 1 and was about to break through to level 2. Therefore, Li Jing was not worried that he would lose to Xiao Qing. He even imagined that after he showed his strength, Xiao Qing might fall in love with him. After all, whether it was before or after the apocalypse, it was easier for the strong to capture a woman's heart. Xiao Qing looked around. This place was relatively empty, so she said, "There's no need to choose a place. Let's do it here." "Okay." Li Jing nodded. "Then let's start." Before he could finish his sentence, a fair fist landed on his face, shattering the glasses he was using to show off. Immediately after, Li Jing felt a sharp pain in his lower abdomen and was sent flying. Li Jing was stunned the whole time. He did not even have time to release his power before he became a punching bag. Even when he was still in the air, Xiao Qing appeared behind him and punched him heavily in the back. The sound of bones breaking was accompanied by Li Jing's twisted and silent expression. When he reacted to the pain and released his power, Xiao Qing had already grabbed his neck from behind and threw his body to the ground. The fireball that had just condensed was scattered. Then, Xiao Qing accurately and ruthlessly pressed down on a certain part of Li Jing's back. The broken bones instantly pierced Li Jing's heart and lungs. Li Jing only realized in the second before he died that Xiao Qing wanted to kill him. Xiao Qing casually threw the body to the man-eating flower that had been waiting for a long time. Then, she twisted her neck and said calmly, "Let's go." Gu Panpan, Gu Chuan. The only person who was calm was probably Yin Hanqing, who knew how cruel Xiao Qing was. He no longer counted how much he owed Xiao Qing because he had already given his entire being to Xiao Qing. So, he did not say anything more. He just pushed a simple corpse cart made of a bed and a dining cart shelf and moved his mother onto the cart. In order to prevent Yin Hanqing's mother's body from rotting, Gu Chuan used his power to freeze Yin Hanqing's mother. A group of people randomly accepted an exploration mission and left the base. Before getting on the cart, Xiao Qing broke the petals of the man-eating flower as if she was checking the teeth of a pet and took out a foreign energy crystal. This was also one of the benefits of the man-eating flower. Those who were eaten by it, whether zombies or superpowered people, would be forced to leave the crystal for Xiaoqing. If the man-eating flower could talk, it would probably cry for a while. After all, the essence was in that small crystal. Then, after it had a master, it would have to hand over the biggest meat for 3 meals. It was simply miserable. When Xiaoqing left the survivor base, someone who had been hiding not far from the base quietly followed her. Chapter 26. The distance from the survivor base to H City wasn't close. It would take more than a day to get there by train. Plus, they were driving off-road vehicles, so they had to stop every now and then. For the sake of safety, they couldn't use the highways and ordinary roads that usually had a lot of traffic, because there would be a lot of ownerless cars and zombie car owners on them. The more remote the road was, the safer it was to the countryside. So Xiaoqing and the others decisively chose to take the small road, but it also lengthened the journey. After leaving the survivor base, the first intersection led to the highway and the other led to the small road. Gu Panpan, who was in charge of driving, decisively turned right to the small road. As a chatterbox, Gu Panpan had already sold out Gu Chuan along the way. Sister Qing, do you know what facial paralysis is? Xiaoqing glanced at Gu Chuan and silently swallowed back the words. Isn't there a facial paralysis sitting next to you? Gu Panpan didn't wait for Xiaoqing to answer and said to herself, in fact, facial paralysis means slow reaction time, stiff face, and face blindness. My brother is like that. When I first met him, people said my brother was cold and aloof, but in fact, he is slow reaction time and face blindness. Ha! Xiaoqing glanced at Gu Chuan again. Probably because he was embarrassed, his ears had quietly turned red. Then she heard Gu Panpan continue, my brother is not only slow reaction time and face blindness, but also has a poor sense of direction. He actually gets lost near his own home. Ha ha ha. My mother always said that in the future, she should find a girl with a good sense of direction to marry my brother. Otherwise, the husband and wife will get lost on the other side of the world. As she spoke, Gu Panpan's mood suddenly dropped. Probably because she thought of her mother, Xiaoqing didn't know what to say. The atmosphere in the car was a bit sad. Xiaoqing was the worst at dealing with this kind of situation. She quickly changed the topic. Look at what's in front of us. Gu Panpan looked ahead and almost lost control of herself. It turned out that there was a woman who looked to be in her 20s and was dressed rather skimpily in front of her. Gu Panpan slammed on the brakes. The car stopped a few centimeters away from the woman. Then they heard the woman's pitiful voice say, Big brother, big sister, can you do me a favor and give me a ride? The weather in the post-apocalyptic world was very unpredictable. It could be snowing one second and hail the next. The only thing that could not be seen was probably the sun. It was gloomy all day long, sometimes cold, sometimes hot. At this moment, the north wind was blowing, but the woman was only wearing a small camisole and shorts. Her fair arms and legs were exposed. She was quite good-looking, with delicate facial features and long hair. She was shivering in the cold, and she looked quite pitiful. However, Gu Panpan's expression turned cold. She took out a metal rod from the car and snapped it in half like she was breaking ice. She then sneered, Get lost. You want to play this game with me? Are you blind? The woman's face turned pale. Seeing Gu Panpan step on the gas, she hurriedly moved aside. Then Gu Panpan sped away. As they walked, Gu Panpan explained to Xiaoqing, Big sister Qing, don't be fooled by her pitiful appearance. In fact, it's all a lie. She specializes in deceiving ordinary men with impure thoughts. As long as you dare to open the car door, the men lying in ambush on both sides will rush up and pull you out of the car. If you're lucky, you'll leave all your belongings behind and walk away naked. If you're unlucky, you'll lose your life. Xiaoqing looked in the rearview mirror. Sure enough, she saw a few strong men holding knives and sticks appear beside the angry woman. However, they only deceive those perverted men and those who are truly kind. For someone with a high IQ like me, I can see through it at a glance. Gu Panpan said proudly. Gu Chuan probably wanted to take revenge on Gu Panpan for exposing his secret. It was rare for him to say a long sentence. Then who was the one who was deceived and almost had their car stolen? Gu Panpan immediately blushed and pouted, brother. Xiaoqing couldn't help but laugh. One of the reasons she was willing to be friends with Gu Panpan and his sister was probably because their friendship was too enviable. After all, in the apocalypse, not to mention siblings, even father, son, mother, and daughter might fall out with each other. It was a blessing to have a brother and sister who supported each other in the apocalypse. This made Xiao Qing think of Mu Lin, the careless girl who treated her well from the bottom of her heart. It could be said that Xiao Qing's life was actually a failure. She was abandoned when she was born. She relied on herself to enter the military academy and entered the army. However, she was discharged due to injury. She fell in love with a man, but in the end, she found out that he was a scum. Her only two blessings were that she met Mu Lin, the girl who grew up with her and truly cared about her. The other was little Baozi, who was a gift from God. Mama, sugar. Xiao Qing was still lamenting when little Baozi, who was nestled in her arms, obediently put the milk candy into Xiao Qing's mouth. Although Xiao Qing didn't need to eat, her heart still felt warm. Just as she thought, little Baozi was indeed the best gift from God. Chapter 27. Let's rest. Gu Panpan looked at her watch, and then looked at the bungalow not far away. After the apocalypse, zombies were much more active at night than during the day. Therefore, people with a bit of intelligence would choose to find a safer place to rest at night. Of course, there was another point, that was, paranormals were also human, and they also needed to rest. In this regard, Xiao Qing felt that she still had an advantage. Her body was much more patient than ordinary paranormals, and if she didn't fight for a long time, she would hardly feel tired. In any case, until now, Xiao Qing hadn't found her limit. Without replenishing her energy, 3 hours of sleep was enough for Xiao Qing to maintain her spirit for a whole day. After cleaning up a few wandering zombies, they settled down. The villages here were almost all connected together, one village after another. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, some strong young people and paranormals took some survivors and left. Some established their own small survival bases, some joined other survival bases, and the rest were mostly old, weak, sick, and disabled people waiting to die. She closed the door at home and relied on the stored food and vegetables at home to survive. Every day was a day she could live. When Gu Panpan climbed over the wall, she smelled a rotten smell. She opened the door and saw a highly rotten corpse hanging on the beam. Looking at the clothes and figure, it should be an old man. Gu Panpan was a little bit silent and called Gu Chuan to put the old man down. The 4 people dug a hole in the yard and buried the old man. This old man should be the kind who was abandoned because of old age or voluntarily stayed. After eating all the food, he chose to end his life. The 4 people were a little depressed, and they didn't know what to say. They just silently ate the dry food and then prepared to rest. The rotten smell in the house hadn't dispersed yet, so they spread out sleeping bags in the yard. About midnight, a roaring sound came from outside. They were the kind of people who were more alert, so they woke up in an instant and put on their clothes as fast as possible. Yin Hanqing quietly climbed over the wall and looked outside. As soon as he looked outside, he was stunned. There were so many zombies that he couldn't see the end, and at the front was an off-road vehicle that was desperately running. Yin Hanqing quickly came down from the wall and asked Xiao Qing to keep quiet. Looking at the scene, he knew that someone had triggered the zombie tide. He didn't know who had triggered so many zombies in the middle of the night. Although Xiao Qing thought that her strength was not bad, even an elephant could be bitten to death by ants. Not to mention the difference between her and the zombies was only the difference between a wolf and a dog. Don't make a sound. Xiao Qing put the little bun in Gu Panpan's arms. I'll go take a look. They wanted to stop him, but Xiao Qing had already jumped over the wall. They all knew that Xiao Qing wasn't stupid. He wouldn't rush into the zombie crowd if he wasn't confident, so they all quieted down. After Xiao Qing went out, she saw the wandering zombie crowd. The off-road vehicle probably ran out of gas and was surrounded by the swarm of zombies not far away. The glass and everything else was broken. Those zombies didn't seem to see Xiao Qing at all and continued to wander. Zombies' sense of hearing and smell were particularly sensitive, especially the smell of blood, which was particularly attractive to zombies. Xiao Qing mingled in the middle of a group of zombies and walked to the off-road vehicle. The off-road vehicle was surrounded by zombies, so it was not easy to squeeze in. Xiaoqing had to hide, so that she wouldn't be stained with rotten flesh and blood. After squeezing her way to the center with great difficulty, Xiaoqing finally saw the scene around the off-road vehicle. The door of the off-road vehicle had been severely deformed and hung there as if it would fall off at the slightest touch. The people inside had all been dragged out, and only white bones with flesh hanging from their corpses were left scattered on the ground. There was no hope. When Xiaoqing was just about to leave, she saw a piece of cloth hanging on the car. It was obviously a cloth bag, but it was torn apart. Several pieces of energy crystals fell under the cloth. Judging by the size, the smallest one was at least level 2. This was a surprise. Those crystals were enough to upgrade her strength by 1 level, and maybe the little bun could also upgrade. Xiaoqing had always believed that the emergence of paranormals was the product of human evolution with the change of the environment. Then what about the end of the evolution? And Xiaoqing also found that zombies were also evolving. The little bun's birth was different from ordinary people. He was born from the dead Xiaoqing's belly. No matter whether it was his body or IQ, he was different from ordinary children. The little bun could also evolve. If the little bun evolved to the end, would he be the same as ordinary people? No matter what, Xiaoqing had to upgrade the little bun. She stretched out her hand to the crystals, and just when her fingertips touched the crystals, there was a sharp sound behind her head. Her years of vigilance allowed her to react quickly. She grabbed the crystal and crawled under the off-road vehicle. The off-road vehicle behind her made a harsh screeching sound. Xiaoqing saw a very strong figure on the other side of the vehicle with the help of the moonlight. His muscular arms had already pierced through the off-road vehicle. More importantly, this person was wearing ragged clothes, and his skin and flesh were in a half-rotten state. He was not a human at all. Chapter 28. Luckily, the chassis of the car was high, or else the one who would be penetrated would be Xiaoqing. She took a deep breath and looked at the strange zombie from head to toe. Its 4 limbs were very uncoordinated. Its arms and left leg were very thick, but its right leg seemed to be deformed. It was thinner than the left leg by more than half, causing it to involuntarily limp when it walked. Although it looked a little funny, it didn't change the savage aura on its body. This was definitely an evolved zombie. Xiaoqing carefully observed, then saw that it was fiercely staring at her. She guessed that it wouldn't be kind. It was very likely that it also came for the crystal stones. At this time, a small head poked out from the shoulder of the zombie. It was probably a baby, a dried-up head without any hair. The most obvious thing was probably a pair of black eyes without white, staring at Xiaoqing. Its facial features were all relatively complete. At least it wasn't rotten, but it looked wrinkled, very much like a monkey. The baby zombie hugged the neck of the zombie, its thin body sticking to the back of the zombie, then suddenly screamed with a sharp voice. Xiaoqing wasn't prepared, then felt a buzzing sound in her head, accompanied by pain. It was blank at this time. The sturdy zombie nimbly jumped up, stepped on the roof of the off-road car, and crossed over. The roof of the off-road car immediately collapsed. The zombie borrowed the force and instantly arrived in front of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing just came back to her senses. Her chest was hit hard. Her back hit the ground fiercely. She only felt that her chest was stuffy, and a mouthful of dark red blood spurted out. The baby zombie screamed again. The sturdy zombie madly ran and raised its fist. Xiaoqing tried hard to concentrate, crossed her arms in front of her body, and was hit far away. She almost understood. The baby zombie should be the mastermind. It should be a zombie with a mutated spirit. The sturdy zombie also listened to its orders. Even the zombie tide this time may have been started by it. High-level zombies were very different from ordinary zombies. Ordinary zombies would treat Xiaoqing as one of their own and would not attack. High-level zombies, on the other hand, already had the ability to judge. They would devour their own kind to gain the power to level up. Therefore, when facing Xiaoqing, high-level zombie, they would have a greater desire to attack. Xiaoqing is now facing this kind of situation. This baby zombie is definitely evolved. Its original goal may be the crystal stones, and now it is ready to take Xiaoqing along the way. If there is only one baby zombie, or only one sturdy variant zombie, Xiaoqing won't be afraid, but the two together, the fighting power is not as simple as 1 + 1. One is responsible for harassing, and the other is responsible for attacking. Xiaoqing wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. She has a premonition. It is estimated that tonight is not going to be spared. Thinking about the little bun who lost its mother in the apocalypse, it may soon. Xiaoqing's heart is angina. She gritted her teeth. When the sharp sound accompanied by the spirit attack sounded again, Xiaoqing suddenly jumped up. The best defense is to attack. She can't give up even a trace of a chance. Xiaoqing and the zombie's speed is very fast, quickly colliding with each other. Xiaoqing fiercely punched the zombie's heart, but it felt like hitting a piece of iron. At the same time, the zombie's fist also fell on her body. Xiaoqing's pain is very low, but she still felt a kind of dull pain. She staggered a step. There is a green brilliance between her hands. Immediately a vine broke through the ground, tied up the zombie's 2 legs. At the same time, she pulled out the dagger on her leg. The tip of the dagger pointed at the baby zombie's head. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. As long as the baby zombie is killed, the big dumb zombie will not be able to do anything. The vine bound the zombie for 2 seconds, then inch by inch, the vine broke inch by inch. Fortunately, Xiaoqing has already endured the spirit attack of the baby zombie, steadily and accurately stabbing the dagger down. Unfortunately, the big dumb zombie reacted, slightly tilting its shoulder. Xiaoqing's dagger grazed the baby zombie's head and stabbed into the big zombie's neck. Xiaoqing immediately released the dagger, quickly stepped back, but she was still thrown out by the big zombie's arm. The big zombie with a dagger in its neck roared. The big zombie with a dagger in its neck rushed to Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing clenched her fist. She can't help but release the man-eating flower. She is ready to use herself as the bait, to make the last gamble. But at this time, suddenly a figure rushed over. He looked up to the sky and roared, like a cannonball, hit the big dumb zombie's body. The big dumb zombie that was rushing to Xiaoqing was suddenly hit by an unknown object and suddenly fell into the zombie crowd. Xiaoqing was stunned. She can't help but look at the figure. That is, Chapter 29. Xiaoqing didn't know how to describe her feelings. It was probably warm, especially warm. She suddenly understood why she would feel that someone was following her every time she came out. She also understood where the faintly discernible feeling of being watched came from. She named him Erdai. It was really a good name. How could there be such a dumb zombie? Yes, the one who was rolling around with the big zombie was Erdai. Erdai was still wearing the clothes that Xiaoqing gave him when she left. It was a bit shabby and covered with dust, but there weren't too many bloodstains. He was like an angry male beast. He threw the big zombie to the ground. His sharp nails pierced into the big zombie's shoulder blades. Rotten flesh and black blood flew everywhere during the fight. The baby zombie was very frightened. It kept screaming, but as soon as it screamed, its head was pierced by the dagger. Xiaoqing fiercely stabbed the dagger down. Then she helped Erdai and broke the big zombie's head. They were as tacit as when they were hunting together. It was as if they had never been separated. Xiaoqing let go of the dagger. She didn't care about the rotten flesh and black blood on the ground. Lying on the ground, she couldn't stop breathing. Erdai, who was so fierce just now, threw himself at Xiaoqing and rubbed against her. Xiaoqing patted Erdai's head. Don't rub everywhere. Why did you learn to be like a dog? Erdai opened his big eyes. He looked very wronged. He reached out his hand. In his palm, there were 2 huge crystals and a small velvet bag. The crystals came from the 2 zombies that were just killed. The small bag was given to him by Xiaoqing. The small bag was bulging. It looked like there were more things than when Xiaoqing gave Erdai. Xiaoqing didn't know what to say. She looked at Erdai's pitiful face. She felt sour and bitter in her heart. Erdai couldn't speak, but she clearly understood what Erdai wanted to say. He didn't want the crystals. He could help her get more crystals. So, don't abandon him. I named you Erdai. Are you really stupid? Xiaoqing poked Erdai's head. Erdai tilted his head. Xiaoqing found that Erdai's face covered by dirty hair looked fairer. Erdai's face didn't rot like a zombie's, but it was pale like a dead person. Now, Erdai's face looked much better. Although he still didn't look like a normal person, but at least he looked like a living person. It's not like you can't live without me. Xiaoqing felt powerless. She closed her arms and hugged Air Dai's cold and stiff body. Why can't you live a free life? I gave you freedom. Why did you come back? Air Dai couldn't speak. He just held Xiaoqing's arm tightly. He was afraid of hurting Xiaoqing, so he didn't dare to use force. He even retracted his sharp nails. He was so careful and afraid that Xiaoqing would run away. Xiaoqing's heart softened. Although she trusted Yin Hanqing, she still had a lot of reservations in her heart. Probably people who were betrayed would be like this. Like the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. Even the person you love the most could betray you, let alone someone who didn't have any relationship with you. But Air Dai was different. He wasn't a human. He was a zombie. He was like a blank piece of paper. Everything he knew was taught by Xiaoqing. Other than Little Bun, he was the last person who would betray Xiaoqing. After hugging Air Dai for a long time, Xiaoqing picked a few high-quality crystals and forced Air Dai to absorb them. Then she rubbed his head. Air Dai, go. Don't come back. Although Air Dai didn't understand human language, he knew that Xiaoqing wanted to drive him away. Suddenly, he panicked. He remembered the last time Xiaoqing left. He saw her sit in the moving box and leave. He followed her secretly. He knew that Xiaoqing didn't want him anymore. Every time he wanted to get close, he didn't dare to. Until Xiaoqing entered the survivor base. There were many people there. Air Dai didn't dare to get close. He was afraid that if he left, he wouldn't see Xiaoqing when she came out. So he hid around the base and waited. But every time Xiaoqing came out, there was someone beside her. Air Dai remembered that Xiaoqing told him that he couldn't appear beside other people. So he followed her secretly. Until just now, Xiaoqing was in danger. Air Dai was like a child who did something wrong. He hugged Xiaoqing tightly and buried his head in Xiaoqing's arms. Xiaoqing was helpless. But she knew that if she brought Air Dai back to the survivor base, Air Dai would be caught for dissection or killed on the spot. Even if it was for Air Dai's good, she couldn't bring Air Dai back. Let's go back to the zombie crowd. Xiaoqing pushed Air Dai away expressionlessly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't show up in front of me again, okay?" Chapter 30. Air Dai stood there in a daze. He didn't know why Xiaoqing was angry, but when he saw Xiaoqing was about to leave, he couldn't help but follow her. Xiaoqing turned around and frowned. "Go back. Don't follow me." Air Dai stopped and stood there looking very pitiful. He looked at Xiaoqing walking away step by step, then suddenly he called out in a very low voice. His voice was very weak, as if he was urging her to stay. Xiaoqing always thought that she had a heart of stone, but she couldn't lift her feet anymore. She suddenly began to question whether her actions that she thought were good for Air Dai had hurt Air Dai. She finally couldn't help but turn around and see Air Dai standing in a mess. His clothes were tattered, and he was covered in dust. Xiaoqing could roughly imagine how Air Dai had secretly followed her. The more she thought about it, the sadder Xiaoqing felt. She felt that her decision would hurt Air Dai, even if he was a zombie that didn't know anything. Did zombies have hearts? Did they have feelings? Xiaoqing didn't know, but Air Dai definitely had feelings. Xiaoqing hesitated for a long time, then sighed and turned around. "Follow me. Listen to me." Air Dai, who was originally very depressed, roared and directly hung on Xiaoqing's body like an arrow leaving the bow. Xiaoqing caught Air Dai, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, and sighed. "You don't look like a zombie at all. You look like a husky. Stupid, silly, and clingy. Come down." Air Dai was probably afraid that Xiaoqing would change her mind, so he quickly got down from Xiaoqing's body and followed behind Xiaoqing, looking very obedient. "You've become a spirit." Xiaoqing sighed and pulled Air Dai to a nearby ditch. The ditch here was connected to a reservoir, so the ditch was not shallow. Xiaoqing directly took off Air Dai's clothes, stuffed him into the water, and washed him from head to toe. Air Dai was probably afraid that Xiaoqing would leave him, so although he hated water, he was very obedient and didn't move, cooperating with Xiaoqing. After washing Air Dai, Xiaoqing found a set of clean, women's clothes for Air Dai to change into. Yes, women's clothes, because in Xiaoqing's inventory, there were only women's clothes and children's clothes. However, although it was women's clothes, It was the kind that was relatively neutral. Dai's facial features were very delicate, even delicate. After washing his messy hair, it became soft and obedient. After changing into women's clothes, it didn't look strange at all. Xiao Qing rubbed Dai's wet hair, which immediately became a mess. She specially found a black cloak from her inventory and let Dai wear it. Don't take off your cloak in front of others, understand? Dai nodded obediently, and then Xiao Qing pulled him away. When they returned, the zombie crowd had begun to slowly disperse. Xiao Qing pulled Dai back to the house where they were hiding. When they climbed over the wall, they were all vigilant. When they found that it was Xiao Qing, they were relieved. Gu Pampan patted her chest. Sister Qing, you really scared me. You left just like that. There were so many zombies outside. I had goosebumps all over when I saw them. Fortunately, you came back safely. Wait, who is this? Gu Panpan's eyes fell on Dai, who was standing next to her. After washing up and changing into new clothes, she really looked like a delicate and beautiful girl. My cousin. He is a mute. When he was young, he had a high fever. He was injected with injections and hormones in the hospital. Later, he lost his voice. He is a little silly. When I went out, I found him in the car that was being chased. Xiao Qing coughed and began to fabricate without any pressure. My cousin went to J City with his family. After the apocalypse, I couldn't contact him. I didn't expect to see him here. So it is your cousin. I thought it was your cousin. Gu Pampan reached out her hand. Hello, cousin? My name is Gu Pampan. Dai secretly glanced at Xiao Qing and then looked at his own claws. The black and gray nails were too conspicuous, so he quickly retracted them. Then he stiffly shook Gu Panpan's hand and then quickly retracted his hand. Your cousin is so shy. Gu Pampan glanced at Dai and coughed. His clothes are also quite unique. His clothes were torn, so I took mine for him to wear. Xiao Qing coughed twice with her fist against her mouth. She was very weak. Fortunately, little Baozi struggled out of Yin Hanqing's arms, and then he ran into Dai's arms. Dai quickly caught little Baozi. After all, he had been a nanny many times, so little Baozi and Dai were very familiar with each other. It should be said that little Baozi was very familiar with bullying Dai. After little Baozi ran into Dai's arms, he skillfully occupied Dai's arms. Little Baozi's interruption eased the atmosphere, and they accepted Dai. Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief. When she turned her head, she saw Yin Hanqing standing behind her. His eyes were gentle. You are back? Xiao Qing was about to say something, but her vision went dark. She saw Dai in front of her as if he was protecting his food. He looked at Yin Hanqing fiercely. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.